Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Every day the approach of fall became more and more tangible. This time of the year always caused Clara an incomprehensible longing. She involuntarily summed up in her mind the preliminary results, trying to highlight the pros and cons of another year lived. This habit appeared to her not by chance. Thanks to the profession of her husband Chuck, with whom they lived almost 40 years before retirement, worked as a chief accountant. In the man's labor book there were only 2 entries. The first, with the date of hire, had been made a long time ago. The second was only a few years ago, when the man took a well-deserved retirement. It is noteworthy that after his retirement, the farm ceased to exist, and its lands and buildings were bought by one of the new millionaires. Chuck Corver wholeheartedly supported the main business of his life, and often told his wife Clara. And they also say that nothing depends on one person. I had to leave, so our collective farm went down the drain. If I had been in my place, I would not have allowed this outrage to happen. The woman was skeptical of such statements of her husband and did not miss the opportunity to once again prick his ego. "Oh, Chuck, listen to you. So it turns out that you alone kept the household, wasn't it? I was in charge of all the bookkeeping. All the numbers were in those hands." Corver vigorously shook his calluses with those hands to make his speech have the desired effect on his eternally mocking wife. Well, Clara had not been the last person in the household in the not-too-distant past either. She started as an ordinary milkmaid, and after graduating from veterinary school was appointed head of the farm. Therefore, the woman rightly believed that she also made a tangible contribution to the common cause. Despite frequent disputes, the elderly spouses lived soul to soul. The children grew up and scattered from their native home, but did not forget their parents. Yesterday, the eldest daughter called to warn them of her arrival. "Mom, we're leaving on Friday. We'll visit you for a couple of days. Don't get ready, we won't be here for 3 or 4 days." This news made me both happy and sleepy at the same time. Clara said to her daughter with undisguised bitterness, "You always only visit your parents." No, to rest, to give the children a chance to breathe clean air. You're in a hurry, you're flying somewhere. And even scientists confirm that the best vacation where there are no factories and plants. My daughter grinned at the other end of the bridge. "Mom, do you even believe what you just said?" "No, I don't deny that the places in our Maria are amazing. But will Daddy give us a break? We're all for him, including Vanya. With Lisa, it's free labor, and he's sure to hand us rakes, scythes, and other tools right at the gate. And then also calculate the efficiency of each worker," will respond to this fair comment. There was nothing, because Chuck really strove to introduce everyone to useful labor. Even the yard merchant had to work off his modest ration of food. Chickens don't dry. The master also reproached them when they refused to fulfill his plan. "Why are you clucking? You have 8 chickens, but only 5. Why am I feeding you?" Kelly, Corvers. The daughter was used to her father's antics. But her husband didn't want to accept his father-in-law's rules. For the first few years after the wedding, they still came to Colorado. On vacations, but they never got a chance to relax. The daughter was very resentful of her father, and one day she told him so. "Daddy, we're not slaves on a plantation to work your acres from morning till night. We are. We just want to lie in the sun, go to the river. After all, a vacation is given to a person to be able to fully rest." Chuck's such wishes put in a dead end. "So I'm offering you the best kind of vacation. Nothing strengthens the body like work. You're used to bumming around in your own town. That's why you look as pale as mushrooms." My daughter and son-in-law didn't voice their discontent anymore, but after 2 wasted vacations, they stopped coming to the village for the summer. Chuck held a grudge against them. He did not find fault in what had happened. The man believed that everything is to blame for the wrong upbringing. Asking children and raised some kind of flawed creatures, and it is understandable why this happened. To their every wish they rode on your head, and now we're getting the fruits. Yesterday after her call, the elder Corver also grumbled for 2 hours, but Clara didn't give in to his provocation, and the scandal didn't take place. And today she got up with the rooster to get ready for the arrival of guests as a hostess with experience. She didn't want to make a nuisance of herself. The day before, she'd cleaned the house and done the laundry. All that was left was to put the clean clothes to sleep. Trying not to make noise, the woman headed for the exit, but one catch treacherously fastened under her feet. Immediately, her husband's voice rang out. "Clara, where did you pour us out so early?" Although there was no one in the house except her husband and the cat Jack, the mistress replied in a whisper, "I'm going to the river. I have to sleep curtains and bedspread. I still washed everything yesterday." The man unhappily interrupted, "And hunting you to beat your legs when the column in the yard." The woman did not enter into an argument with her husband and only promised me not long. "And you sleep, I'll be back. Then I'll make breakfast." Instead of answering, heard a long sigh, meaning that Chuck is extremely dissatisfied with the behavior of his wife. But for 10 years of marriage, Clara had learned to ignore, as they said in the village, her husband's little holes. She was afraid in galoshes not to wet her feet and picked up a basin with Pasternak's underwear. Clara walked leisurely towards the river, which was no more than a 3-minute walk away. But she heard women's voices in the distance and grinned wryly, thinking I was the only one who was so bad. Turns out I'm kind of crazier than I am. I wonder who can't sleep. The woman listened, and after a few seconds, she concluded, "I think it's Wendy who's dashing." "Well, now hold on. Will those two beasts get anyone?" There was nowhere to go, and the woman began to carefully descend the steep cliff, with wild bushes. The closer she got to the morning gathering of Maria's chief gossipers, the more clearly their dialogue could be heard. Wendy divorced her elderly interlocutor, Maria confess. "When you were young, there was such a thing that a man ran away from his woman at night. And there was such a thing. Some men were so lustful to the female sex that they managed to offend more than one hut, and all about nutrition. We ate everything homemade and without chemicals. That's why we didn't get sick. And if there was a simple case of stomach problems, we drowned the mummy. I still always have this remedy in the house." Wendy chuckled nastily. "That's probably why you've been living longer than you should. And you've become like a mummy yourself." It was the fanatical love for the miraculous natural product was the reason that Maria in the village began to be called a mummy. The nickname was very apt, as the old woman had a clear outward resemblance. No one in Maria knew how old the old woman was, and she herself had completely forgotten her date of birth. But memory lapses and some other age-related peculiarities did not prevent Maria from always being aware of events. It was she who was the main spreader of rumors in the village. True, this transmission often resembled a game of spoiled telephone, and as it spreads, local news grows with non-existent details. To avoid becoming the subject of discussion, gossip girl Clara ducked into the bushes. She thought, "I'd better get away from the women, or they'll make up stories about me. Then you'll have to prove to people that you're not a camel." The woman carefully avoided the goods, who also came to the river with goats. "I'll go. There is a convenient place where the water is like crystal." Cautiously, the woman began to wade along the shore. She almost reached the old willow tree. How suddenly from above! Where did the country road run? A noise was heard, cars coming. Clara squatted down in the bushes. The thought flashed through her mind, who else had come here? From the ambush, she could see first a woman and then a man get out of the car. The woman had a shoebox in her hands, the kind of packaging the village store once sold imported women's boots in. So the first thing Corver thought of was that these strangers wanted to throw garbage into the river. She already wanted to tell them everything, but she heard the man irritatedly told his companion, "Go to the car. There is nothing to make light of here." The stranger objected, "There's not a living soul here." "What are you afraid of? It seems to you that there is no one here." "I grew up in the countryside, and I know that in such nice places everyone has eyes and ears." The man nodded toward the bushes that hid Clara. "I do not rule out that over there, for example, lurked one of the lovers of sensation." Secret watchers felt rivulets of sweat running down her back. She felt uncomfortable, but realized she could not give away her presence. The man held out his hands toward the box. "Give it to me, I'll do it myself." The woman handed him the box and headed for the car. The man went down to the bank, but did not stop at the water's edge, but went almost to the middle of the stream, where the current was more rapid. He lowered the box into the water with the words, "Well, that's it. No one will disturb us anymore." These words by the stranger were spoken in such a tone that Clara became uneasy. She sensed that the two men were up to something evil. Barely waiting for the man to go upstairs to the abandoned car, the village sleuths rushed to the shore, but the river current had already picked up their unexpected trophy and carried it down. Corver. She forgot about her daughter's arrival and the laundry left in the basin. She was running knee-deep in water trying to catch the howling box. Wendy watched and stunned. When they saw the running request that it might be with her a rabid fox bit, the unfortunate Maria shook her head disapprovingly. Then she would not have gone into the water. "There's something else going on here. You, Wendy, younger than me, are supposed to help." Wendy mumbled, "Why should I go if she won't?" But the mummy pushed, "Smoke and go. Not just in an hour, the broad will stumble and sink, and will be to blame for her death." Wendy rushed across the stream. "Aunt Clara, what's wrong?" Corver was almost out of breath, and a box screeched a little audibly. "Wendy, catch the box." Corver dashingly understood the task and quickly caught the shoebox. But helped all, the nominated package slips out of his hands, so had to press this low to his chest, and at this very moment a squeak was heard. It was so unexpected that Wendy almost dropped the box from her hands. She yelled all around, "Oh ladies, I think there's someone in there. Hear that? It's making a voice. I'm scared, Maria from the shore. They must be monsters." They decided to get rid of the kittens. "Bring the box over here. Let's see who's hiding in there." Wendy and Clara waded ashore. All three rushed to the mysterious find on their license. The older box was opened by Maria. The old lady couldn't help but be overwhelmed with emotion. Oh, and the fathers. There are also children. The baby looked at the women with eyes as clear as the summer sky. For several minutes, the women were silent, unable to believe what had really happened. Finally, Wendy said they should take him to the warmth. Clara supported the idea. "Let's go to my place. My house is closer. I think the first thing we should do is report it to the proper authorities. I saw the men who did it, a man with such cheerful stubble and a woman with him. I didn't get a good look at them, but I recognized their voices." Maria added if the girl was young. She was definitely a cuckoo mom. There's a lot of them today, wandering around and then dropping off babies. Wendy argued if they had. Were they trying to kill the baby or the little girl? Chuck was amazed when he saw a procession of women led by his wife out the window. He jumped out of Clara's house. "Is something wrong?" "Something's wrong." Peter went to rinse the laundry. She went to the woman's house and began to tell him about the morning's adventure. Interrupting each other, Chuck only shook his head. "How many years have I lived in the world? This is the first time I've encountered such a thing. But the women are not amateurish. We'll have to report it to the proper authorities." The man pulled on his cap and saddled his bike. No sooner had the August sun reached the horizon than the news of the strange find spread all over the world. The true old-timers of the village clutched at their hearts. What a horror! What kind of a wicked day should one be to let one's own child go down the river? It was this version became the main in the criminal case, which was opened after the inspection. The investigators who arrived at the scene of the incident, the absent-minded mother, searched the whole neighborhood, but the search did not yield any results. The found girl was sent to the district hospital, and the fate of the little girl for many years remained unknown to the women who found her. The story began to be gradually forgotten when new circumstances were suddenly revealed. Nancy was preparing breakfast when her husband's displeased shout came from the bedroom. "Where's my shirt?" In addition to irritation in the man's voice, slipped, anger, discontent, and a whole bunch of other negative emotions. The woman whispered, "He got off on the wrong foot again." But aloud she quite peacefully advised, "Darling, take a closer look at all your shirts in the closet." His wife's answer did not satisfy Martin and ideas. "Show me you see I'm busy." "Wait a minute." Outraged sighs came from the bedroom. Then they were replaced by loud thumps on the platinum closet door. Nancy sensed by her skin that another scandal was brewing, so she hurried to the hot. "Martin, are you making every little thing an excuse for a scolding?" The woman opened the closet. "Here are all your shirts. Rose your western eyes and everything will be fine." Man, you poked your wife's chest with your index finger. You're the one with the eyes. I need a pale blue striped shirt. I don't see it here. Nancy blushed and stammered and began to make excuses. I'm sorry, I didn't have time to wash it yesterday, but you could have chosen something else. You have a whole collection of shirts. Martin looked down at his wife. I need the one with the stripes. I have an important meeting today. A blue shirt is the most appropriate for the event. Martin looked at his wife again with a piercing gaze and asked with a sneer, wondering what you were so busy with that you didn't have time to fulfill your direct duties? The woman took her eyes away and began to rub her apron with excitement. Adriana had a report concert in music yesterday, so I didn't have time. The man clutched his head. Every day it's the same thing. Adriana is our girl, incredibly talented. I don't mind. People admire song and dance, but not to the detriment of the family. Nancy quietly objected to Martin. What damage are you talking about? Doesn't our daughter seem to be making progress? The man interrupted impatiently, not generalizing. I've already told you that I have no feelings for that girl. Martin, please be quiet. Adriana might hear. Let her hear. And I'm not going to keep quiet anymore. I'm sick to my stomach and clicky. It was your idea, and I've regretted giving in to you 100 times over, no matter what you do to me. But I can't take someone else's baby as my own. Nancy folded her arms across her chest. Martin, I'm begging you, don't yell. You can't do this. That's right, we can't live like this anymore. I've told you many times to get rid of your illusions, but you're stubborn. What about merging? God didn't give us children of our own. You could have accepted it. That's what smart people do. And you've got the urge to do something. You want to make someone happy, and the result is nothing but trouble. The woman tried to get a word in her defense. Martin, what kind of trouble are you talking about? That poor child is giving you trouble. Do you still ask? Of course you can't understand my resentment because you're only preoccupied with her. You don't give a damn about me. You didn't even deign to wash my favorite shirt on time. Martin held himself back and sprinkled his wife's head with reproaches. The woman flinched at every word and constantly looked back at the door. She still hoped Adriana couldn't hear anything. But the 12-year-old girl was crying silently, leaning against the doorway in her room. She swallowed the bitter tears and whispered, "Still, I'll run away. I'll be patient a little longer, and then I'll run away." Adriana first began to think about running away 2 years ago when she found out she was adopted. The discovery hurt her childish heart. But she had to be patient, because hasty actions could lead to undesirable consequences. Adriana realized that in case of an unsuccessful escape, an orphanage awaited her. She did not want to get into such institutions. Therefore, all these years she had to pretend that she knew nothing about the real situation. The foster parents, the girls also pretended that everything was fine in the family. Nancy especially tried. For 12 years, this kind woman tried her best to keep the family together. Nancy and Martin had been friends since they were students. At first, their relationship was more like a mutually beneficial partnership. The girl wrote essays for the guy, and he willingly played the role of her personal bodyguard. In this format flew all 5 years of study, and before receiving a diploma, both realized that they do not want to part. Martin was the first to bring it up. Listen, Nancy, you and I have already been through it. Personally, I'm depressed about the separation. How would you like to stay with me? Although the girl expected from her friend quite different words. She replied, I certainly don't mind. But what kind of relationship format do you have in mind? Nancy knew that Martin was against old-fashioned conventions. Many times the guy declared that he was in favor of free love, but before his words seemed to be a usual bravado, and the girl didn't pay much attention to them. That's why she took Martin's proposal with understandable wariness. But he also answered her direct question honestly. Nancy, I respect you very much, and therefore I will not deceive you. Yes, I don't want to run to the registry office, but you won't agree to cohabitation. It was both a question and a statement. After a short pause, Nancy replied, No, I wouldn't. I'm sorry, but I was raised conservative. But I'm not the only girl on the planet. You have plenty of admirers, and someone is bound to say yes. The conversation was taking an unpleasant turn, and the girl wanted to leave, but Martin grabbed her arm. "Nancy, don't be so hot. You didn't even let me finish my thought. Anyway, I don't want any other girl. For your sake, I'm ready to change my principles." The boy suddenly blushed and stammered. "You marry me from then on. Everything will be as it should be with the wedding and guests." This crumpled and explanation to the depths of the soul touched the girl, and she gave her consent. Although in Philistine circles, such marriages are considered unstable. Psychologists have a different opinion on this matter. They consider a pragmatic approach is a more reliable guarantor for the preservation of marital bonds than romantic sense of respect for the interests of the partner was the fertile ground on which soon blossomed love. Martin. To his friend, he endeavored to forestall every desire of his young wife, and Nancy reciprocated him. Therefore, the first 5 years of matrimony were the happiest period of their lives. But both were very anxious to become parents. With this question, there were insurmountable difficulties. Doctors found in Nancy some pathology, interfering with her getting pregnant. For several years, the woman was intensively treated, went to expensive resorts, but the matter did not move from the dead point. Then a doctor working with the couple advised not to get yourself wound up for nothing. You have 2 choices. Find a woman who will bear a child for you or take the baby. Nancy didn't immediately realize what the doctor was suggesting and retorted, "Well, if I can't have babies, then the baby won't be ours either. That's not quite right. It will be half yours since your husband has no reproductive problems." Martin saw his wife turn pale. He acted like a devoted and loving husband. No, that's not an option for us. We want a level playing field on this issue. So we will consider the second proposal." Nancy then appreciated her husband's noble act. "Thank you, Martin. You are the best man in the world." The following weeks and months flew by in anticipation. The couple immediately announced their desire to take a baby under a year old who would have no connection to the biological parents. During the waiting period, Martin had cooled down a bit and mentally berated himself for his rash move. He secretly hoped that the search process would yield nothing, but one day they got a call. "Come to our shelter. A beautiful baby girl has been brought in. No parents could be found, so the girl's background is completely clean. And another big plus, no abnormalities in terms of physical and mental development." Nancy was in 7th heaven from the unexpected happiness. Therefore, Martin could not deny her one more small pleasure. After all, he was used to fulfill her wishes, and thought that the appearance of a little girl would not change his comfortable lifestyle. Indeed, for the first 2 years, it was even interesting for a man to feel like a father. But then more and more, often the brain began to sharpen the thought you could have your own child, and grow a foundling. "Tell me, why do you need it?" This question he asked himself every time he noticed that his wife gives all the time to his adopted daughter. When she began to make claims against her, she would laughingly reply, "Martin, well, you are a grown-up uncle. Aren't you ashamed to compete with a little girl?" He was not ashamed at all, because he thought he had more right to the attention of the woman he loved than a foundling taken from the orphanage. Nancy tried in every possible way to fight her husband's jealousy, but neither persuasion nor appeals to conscience worked on him. The first scandal broke out when Adriana fell ill with angina. The girl had a fever, and Nancy stayed with her for 2 days. In the morning, Martin went into the kitchen and found the pots empty. Anger clouded his judgment, and he burst into the nursery, where his wife was fasting at the sick child's bedside. "Nancy, do you think this is normal?" The woman stared at him, uncomprehending. "Martin, there's no need to scream. The baby's only just fallen asleep." She was feverish all night. He mockingly teased the woman, too. "The baby just fell asleep. I woke up an hour ago. Thought I'd get breakfast, but the kitchen was a mess. Martin, you can see I can't. How hard is it for you to make yourself an omelet?" That first time he gave in to his wife, and then even apologized for his unworthy behavior. But it was then that he finally lost the desire to be a father to someone else's girl. Martin began to avoid joint walks. If Adriana asked him to play with her, he would rough her up with food. "You're a big girl, play by yourself." When Adriana went to kindergarten, Martin only as a last resort agreed to pick her up. At school, the same story repeated itself. One day, the teacher couldn't stand it and told Nancy Nikolaevna everything. "It's a strange family you have. It seems that your father lives his own separate life." Nancy was afraid to tell the truth and gave a whole vegetable garden of tall tales, trying to convince the teacher that everything was all right. "My husband is a very busy man. He has a demanding job, so he can't give his daughter much attention." The teacher was puzzled again. But in such situations, children usually make up the most incredible stories about their dads, and your Adriana is acting as if she has no father at all. Nancy had nothing to say, and she hurried to end the unpleasant conversation with the teacher. "I'm sorry, Adriana, and I don't have time. She's in music school." And about the story about father's deeds, I can say from my own experience that not all children are ready to talk about what is going on at home. Our Adriana is a very secretive girl, so she doesn't like to expose her feelings. Nancy saw the teacher look at her in bewilderment. At that moment, she wanted to fall under the ground in shame. But she found nothing better to do than rebuke her daughter. "Adriana, you have a wonderful father. You can be proud of him." The girl lowered her head and muttered under her nose, "He's alien, like in an alien movie." Nancy grimaced. "Adriana, what the hell are you talking about? Are you having some kind of sick fantasy?" The girl didn't answer anything, but after that incident, she finally withdrew and spent most of her time in her room. Adriana loved her foster mom very much and didn't want to be the cause of her troubles. For this reason alone, she tried not to bother Martin's eyes, so that he would not play the son to his wife. When another dispute broke out between the parents, the girl persuaded herself to be patient. "Adriana, there is only a little bit left. After 9 grades, you can go to college." True, this option was possible only when achieving certain success in music school. And Adriana tried her best. She participated in various competitions. And at school, not a single concert was without her. But time dragged very slowly, and one day the nagging of her foster father became unbearable. After the contest of young talents, which was held in the regional center, in the group of participants missing one contestant. Everyone had seen Adriana just a minute ago, but could not say where she was. The group leader was hysterical. What's going to happen now? What am I going to tell Adriana's parents? I'm going to get fired from my job for this. The average guess was 100% correct. The day after the young violinist went missing, the teachers asked her to write a letter of resignation. Adriana was searched for in the regional capital and nearby towns and villages. The best operatives were involved in the search, but the girl was never found. Of course, Nancy was the most worried. The woman could not forgive herself for not going to the contest with Adriana. She guessed that the daring girl ran away because of the unhealthy situation in the family. In secret from her husband, the unhappy mother decided to use the services of a private investigator, especially in the list of her acquaintances was such a specialist. The only person who was happy about the girl's disappearance was her adoptive father. Martin felt on top of his game again, and like an incantation mentally repeated, "Just don't find the girl. Lord, make it so that she would not be found." His heart was pounding frantically in his chest with excitement. Nancy nestled against the fancy glass of the carriage window, trying to see her sister among the people meeting her. But the dirt so thickly covered the once transparent surface that only silhouettes could be seen. The conductor stepped past twice. During the third passage through the parlor car, she lingered near the strange passenger. "Citizen, you're trying in vain. Even in vain. What man can't see what is going on the other side of the camera?" The conductor laughed a good joke, and Nancy shuddered. Her nerves felt as if 2 words, citizen and camera, had been pulled with a whip. Memory instantly responded to these verbal cues. Imagination immediately presented images from the recent past. That, and of a young woman. With a tremendous effort of will, Nancy caught up with the terrible visions and smiled strainedly. Indeed, in your carriage you can safely organize quests. It's quite an appropriate environment. The conductor happily splashed her hands together. "Oh, that's an idea. We need to offer the bosses a creative way to get additional profit." Joy was quickly replaced by sadness. And the woman with a despairing sigh added how many years they have been promising to write off this old stuff. But it's still there. I used to love my job so much, but now it's like hard labor. Nancy felt another jolt to her strained nerves. God, she thought, how many years am I going to shudder at the mention of such words? The conductor noticed the pale face of the passenger who had been sitting by the window all 3 nights of the journey. The woman seemed strange to her at once, but it was considered a gross violation of the rules to pester passengers. The flight was coming to its logical conclusion, and the conductor was anxious to get home. She looked at Nancy once more carefully. You'd better hurry up, because I've got a lot to do. You're the last one left in the vestibule. Nancy was embarrassed again and grabbed her bag. Yeah, I'm on my way. My sister is supposed to meet me. The conductor with annoyance thought I care. Who's meeting you? She's a weird lady, and she's dressed out of style, and her luggage is suspiciously sparse. Suddenly, the clerk had an epiphany. The girls must be from out of town. I should have known better. Something began to fail me. My experienced eye is not good. The owner of the long-distance train car argued with herself for a long time about the nuances of hard work. But Nancy Evans had no idea that it was she who had provoked the activation of the uniformed woman's mental activity. There was heavy two-way traffic on the platform, and Nancy stood for a long time in the middle of this lively stream. Suddenly, the voice of Vanessa Nancy sounded from behind. Why on earth are you standing like a stiff? The sisters hugged each other for a long time and expressed their emotions loudly. When the excitement of the meeting had died down a little, Vanessa confidently took her under her arm. I'm in the car. Let's go to the parking lot. We'll have time to talk. Nancy nodded her head in agreement and obediently followed her sister. She admired Faith, who was groomed from the tips of her nails to her hair. She held herself very confidently, and it finally confused her younger sister. Vanessa had always been cloistered and quiet, afraid to say a word, and here I just didn't recognize her a few times my sister looked back to make sure Nancy was keeping up. Before getting into the car, Vanessa asked in surprise, nodding as she walked to her travel bag. And that's all your luggage? Nancy blushed and mumbled something inaudible. The older sister remarked bitterly nothing. Rags are a matter of time. The main thing is health. If your arms and legs are in place and your head is all right, then no hardship is too great. My hubby is in the throes of extracting dough to then flush the process all at once. Often reminds me of a salt shaker in a latrine. It's quick, but not always efficient. Vanessa opened the car door, and Nancy saw a man with the same lonely beard. I'd like you to meet my sister. This is my treasure. Ethan Simmons is my second lawful husband and passionate. A satisfied smile appeared on Ethan's face without taking your gaze off the laptop monitor. Vanessa, you're too much to handle. You have me in a concrete vise. Nancy could hardly contain her laughter. She was struck not so much by the appearance of her husband, her sister, as by the tone of the man's voice. It was a soft female soprano. Ethan didn't even look at his relative, but unmistakably guessed her mood. Nancy, don't be surprised at anything. You're going to have to deal with a lot of weirdness, but I want to reassure you. I'm fine in every aspect of my life, and my voice is unique. However, it doesn't interfere with my life at all. Really, my gold. Ethan kissed her cheek, and Vanessa kissed her husband with a ringing kiss. Move over. Occupying the entire salon. Her sister's husband instantly shrank back and crawled away to a corner. Nancy timidly sat down next to him. Ethan immediately tried to intrigue his spouse's relative Nancy. If you dream of getting rich, come to me, I'll teach you how to forecast. And Vanessa heard everything and threatened her husband with her fist. I'll teach you. Don't you dare spoil my sister. She'd had enough of that already. Ethan was quiet, but he looked at Nancy with an expressive look. She pretended not to understand. Unhappy thoughts had taken over her mind again. She could not dismiss them. Nancy's whole life lay ahead of her. She wanted very much not to make any more fatal mistakes. The rest of the way to the house where her lover's spouse had made their family nest. Nancy thought about future prospects, but all thoughts were reduced to one alone. That is, without outside help, she was unlikely to be able to bring her fate to an even straight line. Her older sister, as if reading her thoughts from a distance, said confidently, not barefoot Nancy. "Everything will be fine. After all, you are not alone in this world, can fully count on us. Beloved, you occupied an apartment on the 3rd floor of a new building. It was a real apartment with a second tier opening onto a balcony." Nancy was not well versed in the subtleties of modern architecture, so she was struck by the extraordinary organization of space. After looking at the apartment, she said to Vanessa with admiration, "I have no words. You can only see such luxury in the movies." Her older sister grinned. "You haven't seen real luxury. This is a nice apartment. We got it in such a shabby state that we don't want to remember it. My husband was in a trance when he first got here. I saw the opportunity right away, and as you can see, I was right. Honestly, I'm proud of this cozy apartment. It's my favorite thing about it. Feel free to come in and stay with us until you get bored. Come on, I'll show you your room." Vanessa led her sister behind her and stopped at the very end of the long corridor. It used to be a closet, but now it's a decent room for a young woman. "Can you take a shower and get to the table? I'll give you half an hour." Vanessa left. Nancy cautiously crouched down on the edge of the shaft U. It was already as soft and pleasant to sit on as it had been over the years. I'd forgotten what a real bed looked like. The tears didn't come up. Her eyes and Nancy had to make an effort on herself to regain her composure. She whispered encouragement to herself not to drift. "Hopefully everything will be okay." "I'm going to take a shower," Sis advised. The sudsy jets of water hit her body, putting on memories of a very different life. She naively believed that that happiness was given to her on. But it turned out that the artificially created world can shatter in an instant into small shards. That's how China shatters, if you accidentally let it out of your hands. Nancy was younger than her sister by as much as 8 years. As a child, this difference had seemed enormous, and little Nancy looked upon Faith as an adult. The older sister was diligent in her duties and taught the younger one about life. Nancy never swung for unattainable goals, counting on her spleen. "Then you'll be out of trouble. Remember, it's better to move slowly but surely than to run, stumbling and falling." At her young age, Nancy understood little of her older sister's lengthy speech. But Vanessa could speak beautifully, and that fascinated the girl. In 5th grade, she decided for herself to be like Vanessa. She's good at everything. What business won't she take on? She wanted to go to university, and she did. Nancy tried very hard to reach the level of her older sister, and if possible, to go a little higher. But this goal could only be achieved with complete determination, and there were so many interesting things around. In a word, Nancy tolerated, and then spit on all the previously accepted attitudes. "I will live with my own head. Vanessa is smart, but no one will marry her. And I want to find a guy who'll give me everything at once. Why go to all this trouble?" And Nancy didn't waste her energy. After graduating from high school, she enrolled in the Mechanical Engineering Institute because there was a shortage of applicants. But after a year, she dropped out. Her older sister found out about this deed only 6 months later. She didn't choose her words, scolding Nancy. "What do you think with your head or any other place? Today you can't go anywhere without a crust." Nancy objected many girls she knew had settled down quite well. For example, Maria was struggling from 2 to 3 at school, but she met a guy who had everything, and now she was rolling around like a cheese in butter. And Molly from the parallel class won the City Beauty Contest, and now works as a model. Vanessa tried to prove to the naive fool that such happy stories usually end badly, and rich husbands leave their uneducated wives. And the professional activity of modeling is limited by age. Nancy didn't want to listen to her big sister. "Vanessa, I'm sick of you telling me what to do. And in fact, I think you are saying all this on purpose because you are jealous of me." The sister asked in surprise, "What is there to be jealous of? What about my youth and beauty? You'll be 26 soon, and you haven't gotten married. Is that an achievement, getting married?" Of course it is. Although Vanessa was very upset with her, she tried not to show her feelings. Her older sister made a few more attempts to change Nancy's mind, but then she waved goodbye. "Live your life as you wish. Just don't blame anyone for your failures later." But then, At 18, Nancy desperately believed in her luck for her great goal. She befriended the very same Molly who often shone her smile from the pages of fashion magazines. The former high school buddy pushed Nancy through the casting call, and she was noticed. First, luck screamed, and Nancy worked herself to the hilt for the camera. But she wasn't as lucky as Molly and had to star in cheap commercials, baby shampoos, and hygiene products. When she got tired of such humiliating work, she decided to protest. But what she heard back was, "You should be thankful you're getting such a lowly job. Girl, look at yourself in the mirror and you'll realize it. You've got an attractive face, but the rest of it, that's why she's making do with what she's got." It was a real bummer. It left Nancy in a prolonged state of despondency. She even had all sorts of bad thoughts. It is not known how her fate would have turned out in the future if not for a chance meeting with Benjamin. That evening, she was just strolling through the city. Her mind, like her pockets, was empty. Nancy wondered where else she could go to earn a living. Suddenly, a luxury sports car stopped nearby, from which a man of about 35 years old jumped out. Apparently, he did not expect to meet on his way obstacles in the form of money. The girl also did not expect someone to jump on her and fell on all fours right into a puddle. The perpetrator of the accident began to apologize. "Young lady, believe me, I didn't mean to inconvenience you." Everything came out by accident. Nancy struggled to get up and was horrified to see her torn tights and shattered knee. Her eyes darkened with anger. "Did you accidentally walk out? Are you apologizing? I'm neither hot nor cold for your apology. These tights cost me half my paycheck, and now I have a broken knee. I can't walk normally." At the first serious accusation, the man started apologizing again. "Girl, honey, it's all fixable. Of course, except for the broken knee, I'll try to fix it. I'll make it up to you. Get in the car." He opened the door of the sports car, but Nancy shook his head. "And what's that? I'm not going anywhere with you. How do I know what's on your mind?" The man got out of the car again. "I hear you. You're doing the right thing. It never hurts to be extra vigilant." Nancy tried to get her closet into a less decent shape, but the dirty water had managed to disappear halfway down her coat, white in color. Her skirt and boots were also slathered in mud. The culprit of her fall for some reason stepped back 5 meters and concluded, "Yes, it's not a very pleasant picture. It seems that you, excuse me, lead an antisocial life." The insolence of the stranger made the girl mad, and she again switched to a familiar form of communication. "Listen, dude, you still have the conscience to joke. And if I called you now and in the mud, how would you look at it?" The young man, just in case, paid back and put his hands forward. "Girl, sweetheart, let's not go to extremes. We'll go with you now somewhere that sells clothes and you pick out anything you like." Hearing the code words, "anything you like," Nancy softened her tone a little. "Okay, I'll do it. There's a boutique nearby where you can buy everything, despite your not quite presentable appearance." Nancy confidently headed towards the store of branded clothes. The guard was reluctant to let her in at first, but after looking at her companion, he politely opened the door. "Welcome, Mr. Evans," Nancy asked in surprise. "Do they know you here?" The man answered nothing and led her to a row of clothes. "Choose anything you like." The girl fought for a long time with the desire to take away more, hanging with fashionable clothes. But the inner voice warned her against rash actions, and she took only a skirt, a reinforced jacket, and a pair of tights. As an example, the victim paid for new clothes. Only pantyhose she did not dare to put on, because the wound on her knees continued to bleed. The saleswoman came to the rescue. She handed her some tissues and bandages treated in leg. Nancy made herself a bandage and only then took out of the beautifully packaged brake tights, which was the main fashion trend. She fidgeted in front of the mirror for a long time, admiring her reflection, while only one thought swirled annoyingly in her head. This is probably how a fairy tale begins. I would give anything in the world that it never ends. Her experience in advertising came in handy, and she effectively walked out of the examples. The one whose fault the girl had to bathe in a puddle looked at her with undisguised admiration. After a moment's confusion, he pronounced the miraculous transformation of the ugly duckling into a queen. At this point, we should have started the fanfare. But for lack of musical accompaniment, I will, with your permission, play something suitable myself. The man began to imitate various musical instruments, and the staff of the store gave art. The new improviser with applause. Nancy did not see the amount her companion paid at the cash register. At that moment, her greatest concern was whether there would be a continuation of this miserable celebration. They left the store together, and a man right on the platform at the entrance extended his hand to her. Benjamin Evans, Nancy. The touch of the strong man's hand caused a storm of emotion in the girl's soul. After all, this was not a yellow mouth and her no, but a fully established man. Nancy had no experience with such people and was very much afraid of appearing primitive or ignorant. She had forgotten how she had scolded this man only an hour ago, and now she really wanted to please him. Benjamin watched her silently for a few minutes, but he was thinking about something of his own. Then he made a sudden suggestion. I don't think this evening would be complete without a cozy place for you and me. Tell me, what's your favorite? Did Nancy say ice cream and orange juice? That's great. So we're going to go to a cafe that serves your favorite treats. They sat at a table opposite each other, and Benjamin kept looking at her. For the first few minutes, Nancy felt a little stiff. But after a glass of champagne, the awkwardness disappeared. It seemed to her that she had known Benjamin for 1,000 years. The next day they met again, and just 2 months later they became husband and wife. On their wedding day, Nancy finally believed in a fairy tale. But she had forgotten then that fairy tales are bound to have negative characters in addition to good ones. Evans's country house, where the newlyweds settled, lived still widowed Mother Benjamin and his half-sister Lucy, with whom she from the first day did not develop a relationship. But the real personification of evil and perfidy was her husband's friend and companion. Kevin, the happy and very much in love young woman, did not know then that her happiness would last only 2 years, 3 months and 7 days. Nancy, you didn't fall asleep in there. Her sister's voice brought Nancy out of her trance state. She answered cheerfully, trying to shout over the sound of the water. I didn't fall asleep, but I almost passed out. Didn't even think it was possible to be happy about such simple things as a soft bed, a warm shower. I'll be right back. Hurry up. Your nephew's getting impatient. He's dying to meet his own aunt. Nancy threw on a wet-body terrycloth robe, which was hanging on the rack in the bathroom. I too, when I drove all the way here, I thought about how I would meet you and your son. I imagined different pictures, but in life everything rarely works out according to a preconceived plan. Vanessa was thinking about something of her own, and her little sister touched her shoulder lightly. Lucky, wake up. You just scolded me and suddenly you're on the fritz. Is something bothering you? Ira nodded and begged. She looked at her sister again. There is one point on you only do not take offense, but you yourself understand that there is no need for a shot. And Ethan to know the details of your life. Something very heavy came over her shoulders. She looked her sister in the eye for a long time. Is that what you care about? You don't have to worry. I won't talk about my life. I'll keep quiet. Vanessa, I can have dinner somewhere else. Don't worry, I have some money, and I'm not burdened by my presence. Vanessa's face flushed with shame, and she began to justify herself. Nancy, why are you overreacting? I didn't say anything that's not inappropriate. I just asked Vanessa, and I'm asking you not to either. I understand. If I were you, I'd probably be worried that word of Bunny's ex moving into my house would spread all over town. Nancy, that's not what I meant. Robert's only 7 years old, and he doesn't understand a lot of things. And I'm not going to bring your son into my business. I'm just a temporary guest. I won't be here tomorrow. I promise. Nancy, why would you do that? I prepared a celebratory dinner in honor of your arrival. Ethan can't wait. He's prepared a toast. Well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. It just came out of nowhere. Vanessa's eyes glittered suspiciously, and Nancy was tied in a tight knot. Her own pride. Walked down with her sister to the dining room. The evening passed homeward, warm and cheerful. Robert immediately found common ground and spilled all his secrets to her. Ethan made toasts, and at the end of the evening meal could barely move his tongue. Vanessa, with a practiced movement, threw his limp body on her back and said affectionately, "Let's go to bed." "Is that how you outdid yourself tonight?" "At least a little distraction." The woman took her husband to the bedroom and soon returned. "Don't worry, he's a good guy. It's just that his addiction is killing him. I checked him into rehab, but he ran away." They fished him out of the countryside 2 weeks later. "Nancy, you wouldn't believe the time they were looking for my Solomon. I changed my mind. I'm surprised I survived," Nancy said quietly. "Why don't you believe me?" "I believe you. I, too, have to find the person I love the most." Vanessa stared at her sister for a long moment. "Nancy, maybe you shouldn't. Think about it. It's better to start over. You're still very young, and you've got everything ahead of you." "I can't start a new life without my daughter. All these years in the colony and then in the settlement, I've been thinking about my little girl. She is my ray of hope in this unsightly darkness, which for some reason is called life." Vanessa looked away and nervously tugged at the edges of her sweater. "If I understand you correctly, you're going to visit Evans." Just like that, Vanessa moved closer to her sister. "Nancy, I didn't want to tell you before, but the thing is, they don't have your daughter." Nancy screamed, "What are you talking about? Where is she? Could she be?" "She disappeared right after they arrested you. The next night or 24 hours later, but the baby's missing. She was snatched right out of the house. Grandma, Benjamin's mom, went to the kitchen to get formula. When she came back, the baby wasn't in the crib. There was a commotion and the police and dogs came. But they never found the girl. Vanessa, why didn't you tell me before? You knew and you didn't say anything. Why was I afraid it would break you completely?" Nancy collapsed onto the back of the couch, her shoulders and back shuddering. Her sister realized she was sobbing without a man. Vanessa began stroking her, trying to soothe her. "Nancy, get over it. Accept that fact. There's nothing you can do about it anyway. I can't ever accept it. Vanessa, it's so unfair. I've waited so many years for this day. This is the only Nancy I've lived for. I agree with you. It's not fair. Everything that happened to you 12 years ago is unfair. I don't believe then or now that your husband's death was your fault. But it's been years. You can't change anything now. Much to my regret." Nancy listened to her sister and nodded affirmatively. "Yes, you're saying all the right things, but I don't want to accept it. I want to find my daughter, and I will find her. Even if I have to walk around the globe or go to the North Pole for that. I'm not afraid of any hardship. Vanessa, I have lived all these years with this idea that I have a daughter. I understand you perfectly well. But where will you look for her after all these years? The specialists couldn't do it then. What can you do? I'm a mother. I can do anything. My heart will definitely tell me the right decision." After the heart-to-heart talk, the sisters went to their rooms, but both of them did not close their eyes during the night. Early in the morning, Vanessa looked into the room where the sisters settled, and almost stunned Nancy stood at the threshold, stands skinny, traveling with a bag. "Where did you pour that out for us?" The guests grinned crookily. "Thank you for the shelter, but I'll be going. I don't want to be a burden to you." Vanessa brought the passageway with her. "I'm not letting you go anywhere. You know, I was up all night. I kept thinking, what can we do for you? And then this morning, I remembered Sam. He's a friend of my Ethan's. They used to box or run together." Nancy smiled. "Probably running." Vanessa nodded understandingly. "Yeah, my pimple's a lousy fighter, but his head works. You wouldn't believe it, but he's developed his own system and often wins. Sometimes it's a pretty decent amount of money. It's his day job. Oh, I didn't tell you. We're a family business. We bought a little restaurant when we first got married, and it's all thanks to my Ethan. He's a lawyer by training and knows the ins and outs of the law. And his friend Jindin used to be an investigator. Then he went private investigator, so I thought I should ask him for help." Nancy stood in the middle of the room at a loss. Her sister looked at her, sighed, and said with a chuckle, "Don't be in a hurry. There's always time to leave." "All right, I'll stay. Thank you, Vanessa. I haven't done anything to thank me yet." "You are, and that alone means a lot to me." "It means a lot to me too. But it's appropriate to use a phrase from a popular cartoon. You and I are sisters of the same blood, and we're destined to help each other." Nancy disappeared into her big sister's bosom and cried. She remembered how Vanessa had tried to instill in her, from a small age, the basics of life, how she had worried about her small failures and rejoiced at her successes. And then, when her mother died, Vanessa had cared for her as her own child. Her older sister had made many sacrifices for her. She was the one who supported her in every way possible during the hardest years, when Nancy was serving time for a crime she didn't commit. It was even frightening to think what would have happened to her if Vanessa had given up on her then. All of these thoughts were shyly in the young woman's mind. Vanessa was also at that moment thinking about how to restore her sister's will to live. "It's okay, Nancy, you and I will get through this. It's always easier together, and I'll never leave you." Sam considered himself a very successful man. He did not ask a lot from fate and used to be satisfied with what made his existence comfortable. He owned a small apartment and a car. He also had enough money for food and clothes. All this allowed Sam to lead a normal lifestyle, according to his concepts. Of course, in his youth he had completely different plans, but the first 3 years of work in the internal affairs showed that he was not adapted to act at the stroke of someone's wand. Realizing this, a young investigator of one of the district departments of the regional center decided to open his own business. Although this idea was fraught with the risk of being left with nothing, Sam rushed into battle with an open fence. He rented a small basement for his office, launched advertising through social networks, and the business started. Ethan Simmons provided substantial help at first, and Sam felt it was his sacred duty to repay the Institute to his comrade in kind. Since Ethan was an avid gambler, he often got into tough messes, from which he had to pull him out. Many times, Sam tried to set Ethan straight. "Ethan, you're a grown man. It's time to come to your senses. You have a son growing up, and what kind of example are you setting for him?" Ethan, sighing heavily, usually answered in his unique voice, "I know it's bad, but it's a contagion. It's like an infection that gets into your brain and grinds it down every minute." Of course, Ethan couldn't be considered an avid gambler because at times he gave up this dirty business and went headlong into his restaurant business. But such periods were not long, and Ethan would fall back into his quarry. Yesterday, Simmons called him in the middle of the night, and his request was very puzzling. "Sam urgently needs your help. We need to find a man who disappeared without a trace 12 years ago." "Ethan, can't you wait till morning to make your call?" "I'm sorry, but I couldn't. I've got a lot on my plate, and you're the expert on mysterious disappearances." Indeed, in the first years of operational work, young investigator managed to solve 2 cases of many years ago. But quickly and unraveling mysterious disappearances was nothing surprising. Just Sam immediately saw what his senior colleagues missed. In other words, the soap eye effect, which is often found in the professional environment, worked in the investigation. The young operative did not suffer from this defect, so he quickly uncovered 2 records, did not leave them hanging. This event shocked the whole department, and they began to praise the guy at every turn. And others, on the contrary, scolded his viewer. Let nothing surprising. The kid wanted to serve before his superiors to get a star before the due date. To listen to such accusations was offensive, but to defend the honor of his good name did not allow strict adherence to the chain of command. That is why Sam tolerated unflattering comments of his colleagues. When he was promoted, detractors in general toughened and began to openly frame the guy in order not to become a victim of behind-the-scenes intrigue. After a short deliberation, wrote a report to the head of the district department. At first, he didn't want to let him go. He persuaded him to stay. "Sam, you're just at the beginning of your professional journey, so you're not good at everything yet. Believe me, as you gain experience, your perception of your profession will change. We've all been through this school." Brandon listened politely to his boss, but he didn't change his mind. Years later, he never regretted that he hadn't succumbed to his superiors' entreaties. Private investigation gave full freedom of action and was no less interesting than work in government agencies. Already in a year, Sam had his own clientele. Mostly, they were representatives of medium and small businesses, which were not given a quiet life. Competitors often turned for professional help deceived wives and husbands. But usually these were cases of current days, which were disclosed on fresh traces. So the woman's request did not arouse optimism in the detective's soul, although he encouraged his friend. "All right, Ethan, I'll check in with you in the morning." He thought that he would probably have to drop the case. After all, I'm not the only one in the private search business. There are people who specialize in finding missing relatives. With these thoughts, Sam rang the doorbell of his beloved's apartment, waiting to be greeted with the hospitality required in such cases. The door was opened by the landlady and immediately rejected. "Sam, we are looking forward to it. Come in, please. Now we will tell you everything, so to speak, from the first hand." The man followed the woman into the living room and immediately froze in place. On the sofa sat a young woman whose appearance immediately struck him. She had delicate facial features and unusually sad eyes. Ethan's wife introduced the stranger. "This is Nancy, my own sister. She's the one with the missing daughter. Perhaps it would be best if Nancy told you herself." Sam stared into the woman's bottomless eyes and could not tear his gaze away. He had forgotten all about his intention to give up a job that could take up a lot of his time. After a long pause, the man said in a steady voice, "I would like to know everything in detail, when it happened and under what circumstances." The older sister realized at once that her presence might interfere with a frank conversation. "You two talk, but I'll go and put the kettle on." "I'll put the kettle on. Sam, Ethan should be here soon. He went to the bank this morning." The guest reassured the woman. "All right, I'll wait for him. In the meantime, we'll have a word with your sister." Vanessa said Nancy, or Nancy, as you prefer. "My sister and I are simple people and don't pretend to be on special terms. It's for the best. After all, an open conversation gives much more than a formal conversation." When Vanessa left the drawing room, the man turned to Nancy, although it is incredibly difficult. "But try to remember everything in great detail." She looked directly into his eyes. After a second of confusion, Nancy said with apparent defiance, "Unfortunately, the details are unknown to me because the little girl disappeared right after my husband died. That is, he didn't die himself, but was helped." A gambling light appeared in Rindon's eyes. "Is that what you think? Or has the investigation established it?" The certainty was instantly gone, and Nancy lowered her eyes. "Your colleagues blamed me immediately. I wasn't even allowed to dress and feed my daughter. She was only 2.5 months old. She screamed, but they wouldn't let me see her. They handcuffed me and dragged me to the car. It was terrifying. The memories caused the poor woman pain and suffering." Nancy tried to hold back her tears, but it was very difficult for her to do so. "I'm sorry, Sam, but I can't keep my emotions in check. It's been so many years, but it's still like a pain in the ass. I understand you very well, and I will try to help you. But I would really like to hear more about your relationship with your husband. How did the family receive you?" "He had relatives." "Yes, of course. Benjamin, Lily's mother. She's a very nice, kind woman. She took me right away as her own daughter. And things were great with Benjamin, too. He and I never even had a serious fight in all that time," interrupted a woman. "Wait, Benjamin Evans, the famous hotelier, was your husband?" Nancy smiled. "Yeah, and you knew him a little." "I was an experienced young man when Evans was basking in his glory, but I remember well the buzz about his death. The men in our department at the time were very surprised that it was closed very quickly. Turns out you've been named as the lead defendant. That's how it works. Nobody even wanted to listen to me. The investigator who was in charge of the case asked only provocative questions. Somebody told him that Benjamin had a mistress. I made him jealous the day before. There was an incident like that. No. I still remember it as clearly as if it happened yesterday. I don't mean the day Benjamin died, but what happened the day before. We were invited to the banquet by Benjamin's friend Kevin. They'd been friends since high school, and then Benjamin took over the company when his dad died. So out of the goodness of his heart, Benjamin asked him to be his partner. Of course, I never got into my husband's business. So I'm telling you what I learned from him." Sam made an approving sign with his hand. "Take your time. Try to remember the little things, often the unimportant ones. At first glance, details help to solve the crime. Until what time were you at the banquet? Nancy answered without hesitation. We left Kevin's at 10 p.m. Benjamin wanted to stay longer, but I was worried about my daughter. We had a little argument about it, and Kevin even tried to calm us down. He succeeded in reconciling us. We had another glass of champagne and drove home. I felt sick in the car, and my husband asked the driver to stop. I went outside for some fresh air, and we drove on. That is, the village. Basically, all at home I immediately collapsed into bed, because I was very tired and felt deathly weak. I remember I told my husband about it, and he was very surprised, as he was experiencing a similar sensation. Nancy smiled at her memories. Benjamin had made a joke, saying that we had been fed something that made us sleepy. He went straight to the bedroom, and I still had enough energy to take a shower. When I came back from the bath, Benjamin was already in a blissful sleep. He hadn't even changed his clothes since his daughter had been taken to her room by her mother-in-law. I decided not to disturb Lily. Nancy decided to take another break. Sam understood how hard it was for this young woman to remember. He really wanted to cheer her up, but he couldn't find the words that would soothe the mother's heart even a little. She asked me, "Should I go on or is it enough?" No, go ahead. I would like to know why the operatives came to the conclusion that it was you who took the life of your husband. The woman took a deep breath, as if about to dive into the water. I woke up to my mother-in-law screaming. Lucy was screaming too. Stop. There's a new character in your story. Who is it? Lucy, Lily's daughter from her first marriage. Benjamin's mom jumped out of her first marriage at 18. Stupid high school sweetheart. They split up later. Daughter Lucy stayed with her mother. Benjamin's father did the honorable thing and adopted her from Lily. I didn't see her much because Lucy was abroad all the time. Did she have a business or a job there? I'm not sure. And to be honest, I wasn't really interested in the life of a spectacle. She was all tough, all socialite. So you're saying you don't have a relationship with your husband's half-sister? I wasn't trying to impose my society on Lucy. I don't like people who pretend to be something they're not, when in reality, they're just empty inside. Lucy's empty too. Even Lily wasn't very good with her, even though she's her own daughter. By the way, that husband's sister was the loudest one that morning, screaming that I was the one who sent Benjamin to the other side of the world. Pardon me, but the weapon was found. Nancy looked at her hands and hid them immediately. They were common and nice, but it is unknown how they ended up in my hand. When I woke up, I didn't realize what was going on. But even then, I had those damn scissors in my hand. The woman threw herself on the back of the couch. Sam, I can't take it anymore. It's very hard. Let's stop, of course. You've told me enough today, and I even know where to begin our investigation. She asked in an indifferent tone. Where? I want to talk to Evan's neighbors, coworkers, past and present. Your late husband. It would be nice to talk to Lily too. That won't be possible. My mother-in-law died of a heart attack shortly after all this happened. I didn't even get to visit her grave, and Benjamin was buried without me too. Sam saw that Nancy was ready to cry again, but Ethan returned. So they had to cut the conversation short. The man secluded himself in his lover's room, and Nancy went to the kitchen, where her sister was already wielding a knife. Vanessa, let me help you. Yes, I will correct myself now. I will send all this beauty in cabbage with oil, and it will be possible to taste my specialty salad. After the bright speech, the elder sister looked at Nancy and almost cried herself when she saw in what condition the unfortunate one was. Putting aside the implements of labor, Vanessa hugged her sibling relative. How can you look like you've been put through a washing machine? Sam is very experienced. He is a true master of his craft. Trusting him, Nancy exhaled. I don't have any other options. You were right when you said I couldn't do it alone. Vanessa suddenly winked slyly. Hey, did you notice Sam looking at you like that? I can't even find the words, but it's a hard look. I think he liked you. He's single, by the way, so he's not missing an opportunity to get to know Vanessa. I'm not in a situation to have an affair. I have a daughter to find. The landlady grumbled, and one thing does not prevent another. That night, Nancy fell asleep earlier than usual. The excitement, the nervous tension, had sapped her strength. But Nancy came out. In her dream, she saw children playing ball by the seashore. One girl caught the ball and held it out to her mother to play with me. When she woke up with a wet pillow, she realized that she had been crying in her dream. This fact stunned the woman because it was the first time this had happened to her. Sam called 3 days later to find out something, and I had a sniff. I guess I was on the trail. But a very urgent matter has come up, and I can't refuse to help my good friends. By the way, there's a girl missing out there too. She went to a competition in the regional center, and there she slipped away with her instrument. What kind of musical instrument? She's learning to play the violin, and they send her to competitions all the time. That's what her mom told me. It's been 2 days. I haven't heard a peep from you guys. I understand everything, Sam. I can imagine how worried the child's parents are. Help them out. I'll wait. No, I'm taking you on a special assignment to a place with a romantic name. But more than 10 years ago, there was an emergency there that stirred up the whole neighborhood. This case was even written about in the local press. So you can go online. Or should I ask Ethan? If in a nutshell, a local resident went to the river laundry from the floor to sleep, and there is a shoebox with an infant. Nancy felt she was having trouble breathing, and what about this baby? I have no idea, but I think you should pay a visit to this very place. It's time to ask the old-timers. Maybe that woman is still alive. It's not far by train or bus, is it? Nancy thanked the private investigator for the useful information and began to hurriedly pack. Vanessa, I have to leave for a while on our detective's errand. The older sister raised her eyebrows in surprise. Oh, this is getting interesting. Where are you going to go to investigate? There's a village not far away with a very funny name. Sam said that about 10 years ago, a small child was found in the river there. And what do you think? It's your daughter. Babies are dropped off almost daily, so don't get your random facts out of whack. Vanessa, the timing is consistent. It was August, and Benjamin died in August. It still doesn't prove anything. Even if the intruders took the child, why would they drive a few hundred kilometers to pick him up? Well, it's possible, though. We don't know why they kidnapped your daughter. Go to it. Or if you want, wait till the weekend, and I'll take you out. No, I have to go tonight. Nancy made it home without adventure. The village looked like a series of gingerbread houses, the kind you often see in illustrations in children's books. As a child, she herself had dreamed of living in such a house and painted platbands. The woman walked along the street, but did not see a single living soul. She involuntarily burst out a question. I wonder if anyone lives here or has everyone left. She did not expect anyone to answer her half-whispered question, but a cheerful female voice sounded from somewhere off to the side. We had few survivors left, and even fewer walkers. Nancy began to turn her head, and the rustling of leaves was heard around. Then a woman about 50 years old appeared. She had a handful of seeds in the palm of her hand, and she deftly threw a few into her mouth. There was a distinctive sound, and immediately the husks flew onto the country road. At that moment, Nancy suddenly remembered that it was forbidden to litter in public places. In the colony, one could be put in the punishment cell for such things. Probably her look was so eloquent that the villagers unraveled it. Everyone here is spitting on the cleanliness of the streets, and we only have 2 of them. You can count the inhabitants on your fingers. So we have to fight boredom with various means. They're good at calming everyone down. I immediately buy several packs to spare. Oh, why am I talking to you about stove seeds? You must have come here on business. Nancy got worried. Yes, I read on the internet that you found a baby in a box here about 10 years ago. I'd like that. The women joyfully welcomed the newcomer back into their arms. This impulse stunned Nancy, and she tried to free herself, but the villagers were not embarrassed by the newcomer's behavior. She cheerfully clambered for the territory. You've come right to the right place. It was me and Aunt Clara who caught that box. There was a pretty girl on it, painted and written in a foreign language. Nancy felt the blood rush to her head. Benjamin had given her low-heeled boots before her daughter was born because her feet had been severely cut off in the last few months of her pregnancy. The gift came in a brightly colored box, and her husband quite remarked, "Specially ordered just for you just yesterday, this exclusive pair arrived from Italy," meaning they're handmade. The boots cost a fortune. Nancy put the boots on right away and threw the box in the closet. "Hey, where'd you go?" "Been here and gone." The woman was sewing Nancy's sleeve. "Is there anything else you're interested in?" Did Nancy lose her numbness? "Yes. I'd like to know what happened next." She rolled her eyes. "There was nothing. Aunt Clara's husband, they have him in that house on the river." That is, Clara also lived with a poet and a sorrowful poet. And Sevastianov is already in his second year. How did he introduce himself? "If you wish, I'll take you to the Broad." "Thank you. I don't think that's necessary. You've told me everything you can." "Tell me, is that box still there by any chance?" Zelenka gave another triumphant cry. "I thought at the time that the time would come when people would ask about that box. Aunt Clara threw it away at once for no reason. It was too much cardboard. And I picked it up. I really liked the girl in the picture and even cut it out. Do you want me to show you?" "I want to show you." "Then follow me. My name is Wendy." Nancy could barely keep up with her village guide. She did not take in what the cheerful woman was telling her, as she had little interest in life by the sea. In the fall, the landlady invited her into the house, and the guests at once saw in the dark hallway a fragment of a brightly colored box. Now she had none left. That in that box was her little daughter. Now it remained to find out who had decided to massacre her defenseless daughter in such a brutal way 12 years ago, and also very much wanted to know in what orphanage the little girl was sent. But could not answer exactly to this question. Who knows? Probably taken to the district hospital first. There used to be a children's ward there, but maybe they send it straight to the city. No one can answer that now. The district police officer has changed, and the new one doesn't know anything about that story. "Thank you for the detailed story." Nancy considered her mission accomplished, but the landlady tugged at her sleeve again. "Where do you think you're going? Don't be in a hurry to stay with me for half an hour. I've just given you some tea with these pens. When I'm bored, I give up all custody. I used to work in the cafeteria at the high school. I learned to bake there." Nancy didn't want to offend this kind woman, so she accepted her invitation. Aunt Wendy talked passionately about village life as she drank her herbal tea and pens with relish. She didn't notice how the time flew by. Only casually glancing at the clock, she couldn't believe her eyes. "Oh my God, it's 6:30 p.m. I've missed the bus." Aunt Wendy readily offered to let you stay the night. "And then you can go in the morning." "No, I have to go back to town today." "Why are you in such a hurry?" Nancy was confused. She couldn't tell this from a complete stranger about the purpose of her visit. But Wendy had a discreet voice. She stared at her guest for a moment, then slapped herself on the knee. "Oh, I'm an old fool. Don't you dare. What's the price?" "Was that box really your daughter in it?" Nancy whispered. "Yeah, you guessed it. It was my little girl. She was only 2.5 months old. Me and the women thought Mother Cuckoo planted the box. So it turns out your baby was stolen from you. It turns out that way. What about me? What's going on in the world? How can we go on living? I'll walk you to the train station. The train stops there for a minute, but you're young enough to catch it on time, and she'll be there in 40 minutes. Aunt Wendy led her a short way through a small wood. Nancy could hardly keep up with her and thought at that age such a sprightliness could only be envied in this woman. But she immediately pictured the empty Maria Street and realized there was nothing to envy. The electric train arrived right on schedule. Nancy said a warm goodbye to Wendy and promised to visit her if she could. It was cool in the half-empty car, and Nancy decided to move to the next car. Maybe there would be more passengers there and it would be warmer. She stepped out into the vestibule and immediately heard the wistful sounds of a violin. She wanted to know who was entertaining the passengers. The next carriage was much warmer and the few passengers were listening like a girl, a teenager playing the violin. Nancy herself had attended music school in her distant childhood and was even prophesied to have a creative future. But she never thought about a career as a musician. The girl perfectly mastered the instrument and masterfully performed well-known works. Having finished playing, she carefully put the violin in a modest case. Nancy had unmistakably identified it as a piece of junk that could be purchased in any specialty store. The thought flashed through her mind that the girl clearly had talent. Too bad she has to make money this way. She tossed a few coins onto the case. The other passengers donated to the young musicians as well. Whoever could spare as much as they could. Nancy sat by the window and soon passed out. She remembered the day gone by and thought about what to do next. The train jerked and a metallic voice announced the final citizenship. Passengers are kindly requested. Do not forget your belongings in the carriage. Since Nancy had set off at Marusi's, Marusi was light on her feet. She let this appeal pass her ears. The clock above the station entrance showed 7:45, and Nancy thought probably Vanessa and Ethan are already worried and Robert. I promised to show you how to make paper. It turns out I've tricked him, because by the time I get there, it'll be 9 o'clock. Before Nancy could scold herself properly, she heard someone's noisy breathing behind her. She wanted to turn around, but at the same time there was a ringing voice. "Auntie, may I walk with you for a little while?" Nancy answered machine quickly she could, and only then did she stop. The voice belonged to a young violinist who only half an hour ago had been entertaining the public in the train by playing the violin. A bad feeling crept into the woman's soul. "Wait a minute, why are you alone?" the girl replied defiantly. "I am old enough to move around the city unaccompanied, but if you are so interested, I can tell you that I am returning home from my grandmother's, where my loving parents are waiting for me." During her years in the colony, Nancy had learned to distinguish lies from truth. There was no sincerity in the girl's voice, and she didn't believe her. "Tell me, do your parents know that you earn money in the electric trains?" This question caught the girl off guard, which was evident on her face. But she kept lying anyway. "Auntie, I didn't do anything like that." "Is it a crime to play on the train?" "Of course not. But you're too young to earn money that way. I was just playing. A woman gave me a candy bar and that's all. I didn't take any money." The girl's whole light was protesting and her insolence was astounding. The teacher woke up. "How are you not ashamed to lie? I myself personally put a few coins on the case." The girl grumbled, "Could have thrown at least rubles. 100 is money. All adults are greedy to the point of disgust. And my so-called daddy bought up too." It was like an electric shock ran through Nancy's body. "Hey, violinist, you didn't run away from home, did you?" The girl froze for a few seconds with her mouth hanging open. Nancy rushed after the young stranger, and then they were gone. For about half an hour, she walked about the square in Nancy to see the little moon, but only wasted her time. Yes, Aunt Nancy, hello. You screwed up all the way home. She thought about the 2 encounters she'd had today, both seemingly random, but there was something about them that kept Nancy on her toes. Before she could even touch the bell, the apartment door swung open. Vanessa pounced on her with reproach. "Where the hell have you been? We've been worried sick. We don't need you to be missing." Nancy kissed her sister. "Don't square. It's a good thing I caught the train, or I'd have had to spend the night in the countryside or even in an empty field. You have no idea what I've learned." Of course, it wasn't without its adventures. Vanessa patted her shoulder. "Okay, you'll tell me later. For now, I'll feed you dinner. Although normal people don't eat at this late hour. I'm not really hungry. My mother fed me with these hands in the fall from a very kind aunt. By the way, she told me a lot of interesting things." "Do you know where your girl is?" Nancy waved her hands. "Alas, no. On the contrary, I'm still more confused. But there is a certainty that my little girl is alive." Vanessa shook her head and cautiously remarked to Nancy, 12 years have flown by, and your daughter is definitely not a baby anymore." The smile slowly slid off the woman's face. "You know, I hadn't really thought about it. In my mind, she's still a tiny little lump of pink." Sam called. "He had some news for you too. He even wanted to stop by, but when he heard you were gone, he changed his mind. You've clearly hurt a man's heart." Nancy blushed. "Vanessa, don't make up things that aren't there. Sam just really wants to help me. I think he's a very decent man." Nurse muttered. "Decent people fall in love too. It's not forbidden by law, only in bed. Nancy remembered that she had not had time to tell her sister about the adventure in the train car. As she fell asleep, she thought, it's all right. I'll tell you tomorrow. I wonder where the violinist is now and why her parents are so negligent of their duties. In the morning, the impressions left after yesterday's trip had dulled a little. Nancy no longer found it strange that a girl unknown to her was earning money by playing in a train carriage. So at breakfast, she spoke briefly only of the trip to Maria. Together with her sister, Nancy escorted the race to the door of the school. The boys looked at her hopefully. Aunt Nancy, and you won't run today. I promised yesterday to show the boys a paper crane. Nancy felt ashamed that she had let her nephew down. You want me to pick you up from school and we'll go straight to the cranes? Robert was delighted at the offer. I want to. Aunt Nancy, you just show me and I'll do it myself. I can put things together fast. That's what Mom says, and so does the teacher. Robert disappeared behind the school fence, and Vanessa pulled her sister along. Get in the car, Mary Poppins. I'll keep you under lock and key until tonight so you don't fool my kid again. He's very sensitive. He only gets offended by women for every little thing. We made it home. As we pulled up, he handed the sisters each a small bunch of flowers. Perhaps it's not quite appropriate in this situation, but I don't want to be rude. Vanessa was on a roll. Thank you, Sam. You've shortened this boring morning. My Ethan has completely forgotten that his wife should get flowers once in a while. I hope you're here with some news. Yes, I did manage to find out something once the three of us were in the apartment. Nancy suddenly asked, Did you find the missing girl? I was surprised. I don't understand. Which girl are you talking about? The one your friends are looking for. You must have forgotten that you told me about it yesterday. Yes, I forgot. I'm under a lot of pressure at the moment, so I can't keep it all in my head. But thanks for the reminder. By the way, it's an amazingly interesting case. Can you imagine a 12-year-old girl deciding to go on the run? She had been working out a plan for a long time and decided to implement it during a trip to the contest. Nancy asked, What pageant? Sam shrugged. I didn't really understand it myself, but something to do with music. In short, the girl has several talents, including criminal ones. After the event, she wasn't on the bus. The police were called immediately, but nothing concrete. The mom's a black cloud. She's a good friend of mine. Vanessa asked about the dad. Probably doesn't care. There's a separate story with the father. Just before his daughter disappeared, he said he was leaving her for another woman. That's probably what caused her to run away. Little adventurous. Sam suddenly exclaimed to O. I've got a picture. I pulled a color photograph out of my pocket. Nancy looked at the photograph, and her face turned white as a sheet. The detective noticed the woman swaying and rushed over to her. Are you ill? An indignant smile appeared on the unfortunate woman's face. It's nothing. A little dizzy. It'll pass. I just didn't expect to see this photo. After all, I had just talked to this girl last night and even scolded her. I immediately suspected something was wrong with her. The older sister and the man looked at each other in surprise. The man picked up the photograph that had fallen out of Nancy's hands from the floor. I think our joint investigation is taking an interesting turn. Please tell me about yesterday's meeting. Nancy had already gained complete control of herself and described the scene in the train carriage in detail. She ended her narrative with the words, If I had known that her mother was looking for this girl, I would not have let her go, or I would have gone straight to the police. Try to reassure the client not to make a fuss in vain. If I were you, I'd do exactly the same thing. And after all, you can't catch every teenager in town. They usually have them in the evenings. Ira was more than willing to give me a hint. Hardy near our entrance too. Every night young people gather and can make noise until midnight. It was noticeable that Nancy was thinking hard about something. The older sister was about to continue the topic of youth gatherings, but Sam looked at her expressively. He realized how difficult it was for this woman to understand everything that was going on. And after all, she had been through so much turmoil in just the last few days. And that was without taking into account the years that the unfortunate ones had to spend in prison. Aang had asked his friend, with whom he had once worked together, to raise the case of the businessman Evans. It was true that so far he had only familiarized himself with it superficially, but some blatant points spoke of a gross violation of the investigative process. He did not want to burden the women with unnecessary information because he wanted to understand everything himself first. But he decided to share one thought with Nancy. "Don't get me wrong, but I had an idea to introduce you to Adriana's mom." She didn't immediately realize who she was talking about, so she asked Adriana again. "Yes, the missing girl's name is Adriana, short for Adriana. If my guess is correct." "No, it's correct. I wanted to ask you to arrange a meeting with the girl's mother. After all, we're friends in need and will understand each other. Besides, I'll be able to tell her that I saw her daughter on the train, that she's alive and well. I think it will calm her down a little bit. Thanks for understanding." Nancy's mom is a good friend of mine. A long time ago, we lived in the same neighborhood and even went to school together. Then my parents got an apartment in a new neighborhood and Nancy moved to another city. But we always kept in touch with her. Unfortunately, her family life didn't work out so well. In short, the poor thing was suffering. And then two misfortunes coincided. Her husband left her and her daughter disappeared. So she's in desperate need of support right now. Brendan promised to contact Nancy soon. But before that, he wanted to find out about the two characters who had so far remained in the shadows. The meeting in the main office of the Vega Corporation was coming to an end when the cell phone on the CEO's desk began to vibrate. Kevin glanced unhappily at the gadget, but did not answer the call. To keep his mind on the meeting agenda, he tossed the cell phone into the desk drawer. The subordinates were glad for the unexpected pause, but Kevin did not let them relax. "I want to remind everyone here that discipline is paramount. Each of you has a responsibility to support the common cause and motivate your departments to do the same." As if on cue, the department heads started making notes in their notebooks. Kevin enjoyed his moment of greatness and looked down on everyone. He liked to be understood half-heartedly, but he liked to be obeyed even more. Even in his high school years, Kevin made bids for leadership, but he couldn't compete with Benjamin Evans. Not him, but Benjamin was always sent to the Olympiads and various forums. Evans had a phenomenal memory, so it was easier for him to study. The girls were crazy about him too. They didn't pay attention to Kevin. His bitter father also had a prominent position in the city, and Kevin's parents lived from paycheck to paycheck. But all these disadvantages did not prevent the boys from being friends. True, everyone had a different concept of friendship. Benjamin believed that with a comrade should share the joys and give him a shoulder in a difficult hour. And Kevin sought only benefits from such a relationship. But Kevin skillfully concealed his thoughts and for decades nurtured a plan to outdo his rival. The first time Kevin put a friend a pig when he was going to marry a girl he also liked. In order to upset the wedding, Kevin went rogue. He decided to get irrefutable dirt against Benjamin's fiancée. To this end, he invited the girl to a birthday party and got her drunk, when she fell senseless on the couch, arranged a photo shoot with the participation of another scumbag. The very next day, as if by accident, he planted the racy photos on a friend. Later, when Benjamin was tearing up with anger, "How could she do that to me? I trusted her like I trusted myself." Kevin came at first call to comfort fellow Benjamin. All lovers are blind, and you too are blinded by a strong feeling. But don't despair. You will meet a girl who will be worthy of being your wife for almost 15 years. Benjamin was afraid to get serious with the farer. Kevin was also having mixed success on the personal front. But thanks to a friend, he'd made a name for himself, and it was after Evans asked him to be his partner. "Kevin, you don't have to do much of anything. Your only job is to keep your nose to the wind." Kevin needed no further explanation. He immediately set about establishing strict order in the company. Benjamin's father had just died, and he appreciated Kevin's help. "I had no idea you were such a good organizer. If this keeps up, I'm going to promote you to the board of directors." It was the height of careerist aspirations. But as time went on, Benjamin seemed to forget about his promise. And then Kevin learned from third parties that his friend met some uneducated wiretap and was going to marry her. He couldn't help himself and expressed his resentment to Evans. "Benjamin didn't expect you. I thought we were friends. And you didn't even tell me you had a girlfriend." Benjamin was surprised. "I don't think my personal life is anyone's business. And anyway, Kevin, childhood is a thing of the past. You have to look at life as an adult. Okay, Benjamin and I will take note, and I won't bother you anymore." After the wedding, Benjamin became completely estranged from his friend. He stopped sharing his plans with him, which suggested the end of the trust limit. The resentment accumulated day by day imperceptibly degenerated into hatred. Kevin's inventive mind began to think over a plan of another mischief when he unexpectedly found an accomplice in the person of his half-sister Benjamin. Lucy has long made ambiguous signs of attention, but he tried not to notice them. For one thing, the friend's sister was much older than he was. But the main drawback was her not tolerable character. She even brought her own mother to a heart attack more than once. The combination of all these reasons made Kevin behave with Lucy extremely cautiously. But everything changed after the wedding of a friend. Kevin noticed right away that Evans had gone cold on him. And then Lucy added fuel to the fire. One evening after a family tea party, she caught him in the hallway. "Kevin, can I have a word with you?" He had the right manners, so he answered, "Of course you may. What man can refuse when he's asked for something? Pretty woman." Lucy flirtatiously waved her eyes. "Although you're lying out of your ass. But it still feels good." "Me too. So what was it you wanted to tell me?" Lucy moved closer to him. "I overheard Benjamin talking to someone on the phone. He said he was planning to reorganize the company, cut the man. You're smart, and you know very well that such events usually involve downsizing. I've noticed your brother hasn't been very forthcoming with you lately. I think his own blood is affecting him badly. Is it excitement, pulse, temples, and Kevin?" asked Lucy. "You laid it all out to me for a reason." The woman pressed herself against him. "You got it right. I want justice, and I'm not used to being second best." Lucy sank her lips into his. Everything further happened by inertia, and Kevin found himself in Lucy's bed. But her passion quickly faded and she changed to a businesslike tone. "Kevin, you and I can form a mutually beneficial alliance. Our interests are aligned." "True," he grudgingly replied. "I guess we do. But I don't know where you're going with this yet." She lightly touched the tip of his nose with her finger. "Okay, you get it. It's written all over your forehead that you hate Benjamin. I've hated him since I was a kid, too, because he took my mom and his wife away from me. I despise her, too. I can't stand the sound of her voice. Stupid sheep. You don't know your buddy's gonna be a daddy soon, do you? Hee hee. How do you know such details?" How? From a camel, my classmate. My ex works at the clinic. She told me. That's the reason I decided to stay here." "Lucy, can you answer one question honestly? Please, you have business overseas. Isn't that enough for you?" Lucy couldn't stop laughing for 5 minutes. "Kevin, is this the business of meetings, dogs, and kitties? I had this piece thrown at me to shut me up, and Benjamin got the whole pie, and I have to make it right. And you're gonna help me." "You will." "Yeah, I did." The accomplices began working on a plan. They came up with several options, but each had major flaws, so time worked against them. They had to take drastic action shortly after the Evanses gave birth to their daughter. Lucy was on the verge of panic. Kevin just a little more and all would be lost. Benjamin's secretary told me in confidence that Benjamin had a long discussion with his lawyer the other day. My heart tells me he's going to write a will. You on the board can find out. The man promised well. I'll try to find out, because Kevin never took the easy way out. He went tricky again and invited a friend's lawyer he knew to a restaurant. There he gave him a good meal and extracted the necessary information. The lovers decided to act immediately. Kevin's anniversary was just around the corner. Lucy slipped a potent sleeping pill into the glasses of the spouses, hoping that they will quickly get tired and it will be possible to simulate a road accident. But the wife was in a hurry to get home. When the drug had not yet had time to take effect, they had to change the plan on the fly. Memories of that terrible evening caused a stigma, horror, and disgust in the soul. Although 12 years have passed, but he clearly remembers how Lucy stabbed the axe Benjamin under the ribs. Then she had cold-bloodedly laid the implement in sleeping Nancy's hand. The CEO's thoughts were interrupted by a suspicious sound. Kevin began to look around and even looked under the desk. Then he pulled out a desk drawer. "Buddy, it's a simple one. Completely forgot I had pushed you in there." He sighed heavily. He said, "Yes, I'm listening to you." "No, I couldn't answer right away. I had a meeting." "You know about it very well that you are sure? Or is it another rumor again?" "Okay, I'll check it out, and please don't get ahead of yourself." Kevin turned off his phone and froze in his chair in an uncomfortable pose. Lucy had just informed him that the DA's office had reopened the old Evans death case, seeking accomplices, and announced that the private investigator was questioning their old housekeeper who had worked at Evans' house for many years. The man's eyes darkened and his throat was crushed by an invisible hoop. He wanted to reach for the phone to call the receptionist, but he didn't have time because suddenly darkness fell upon him. The last thing Kevin thought about was the thought that any evil would not go unpunished. The secretary was worried by the lack of signs of life in the principal's office. Only at the end of the working day, the girl thought that the chief was asleep and half quietly called Kevin. "Can I get you some coffee?" But there was no answer. Then the girl, after a long hesitation, decided to come closer. She realized that the chief was dead and loudly screamed X-ray. Already in the evening of the same day learned of the death of one of the conspirators. He thought that the punishment had caught up with one criminal, but the accomplice would also get his. The meeting between Nancy and Nancy took place the very next day. By all accounts, he called his buddy to reassure her and told her that Nancy had seen her. When the doorbell rang, Nancy was home. The one woman who stood at the door immediately liked her such an open, slightly frightened look. "Please excuse me, Nancy. I won't take up much of your time. You just tell me how my Adriana looked. Is she doing well?" It wasn't until she said that Nancy realized who she was looking at. "You're Nancy, aren't you?" "Yes, I am." "Come in. I'll make some tea and we'll have a talk." While Nancy was making tea, Nancy said, "You see, you probably think I've been mean to my daughter, and that's why she ran away. It's not like that. I would do anything for her. She's my whole world. But my father and I didn't get along. He couldn't love her, no matter how hard I tried. But every year he grew to hate her. I'd like to tell her that Daddy doesn't live with us anymore, that she has to go home. I'll be sure to answer all her questions." Nancy finally paused, and Nancy managed to say, "Don't burn yourself. It happens to teenagers. They're all extremes at that age. No halftones. Everything's gonna be okay. I don't understand about the questions. You still have something. Look, I'm not trying to judge you, but I hope I find my daughter someday. How do you communicate? What kind of questions do they have? What are the concepts?" Nancy sighed. "You see, Adriana is not our own daughter. We adopted her when we found out we weren't going to have children of our own. Or rather me. I didn't want my daughter to find out at all. But my husband opened her eyes wide. He didn't tell her. It's just that when we fought, Martin was never one to hold back on the language. Lately he's been yelling that he's sorry we took Lena. It's not that Adriana's a wonderful girl. She just has a lot of resentment right now. We don't necessarily need to find her so she doesn't do anything wrong." Nancy put her hand on Nancy's arm. "You will definitely find her, we will. We'll start walking around town in the evenings from today. There's no way we won't meet her." Nancy wiped her eyes. Looked at Nancy. Sam was not mistaken. "You really are a very wonderful and kind woman." Nancy was embarrassed. For a week now, she and Nancy had been walking around town in the evening, skirting bus stops, alleyways, parks. A couple of times they heard people say that there was a violinist playing in the street somewhere. But they were late both times. Adriana was already gone. Nancy kept trying to cheer Natasha up. She had already bonded with the woman and was no less worried about her daughter than Nancy herself. This time they sat on a bench in the park. Nancy called Sam, asked where they were, and told him to stay put. He showed up 15 minutes later and started talking right away. "I've been under a lot of pressure lately. Nancy, let's start with you first. Lucy was arrested last night. She's the one responsible for her brother's death, and she's the one who organized the whole thing with the help of her lover. It's Kevin. Yes, it is, and for some reason I thought it was. Oh, Adriana saw them too. She didn't know what to do, whether to run away from her mom or run to her mom. Nancy shouted to Adriana, "Daughter, Daddy doesn't live at home anymore. He has left. Please come back." Nancy powerlessly sank down on the bench and cried. Adriana stood for a second longer and then rushed to her. "Mama, don't cry. Don't cry." Mama Nancy turned away. Jesus. Maybe there would come a time when she could hug her daughter like that. Sam's phone rang. He answered it and smiled. "I suggest we continue the conversation at Vanessa and Nancy's. Vanessa just called to say she had set the table." Nancy looked at Sam in surprise. Vanessa didn't say anything about having an event today. Nancy stood up. "We'll go. Let's not get in the way." Sam shook his head negatively. "No, you should definitely attend as well." Seeing the two women and the girl staring at him in amazement, Sam spread his hands. "I'll explain everything, but it's better to do it at home." Vanessa, as soon as they entered, immediately began to invite everyone to the table. She was so fidgety that Nancy immediately suspected that her sister was aware of what Sam wanted to tell. At first, there was silence at the table. Then Nancy couldn't stand it any longer. "Sam, you'll forgive me if Lucy confesses." "Yes, Nancy, you'll be exonerated. Plus, you'll get your business back, all the Evans family property." Nancy smiled sadly. "I would give it up without regret to keep Benjamin alive and to find my daughter." Sam set his fork aside. "But it was time to continue my story. After Benjamin died, you went to prison, and Benjamin's mother died of a heart attack. There was only one obstacle left in the way of money. Is this your daughter?" Nancy shuddered. Sam's words sounded so ominous. Lucy and Kevin had decided to get rid of her altogether. Apparently, there was still some humanity left in them, if only a little, and they couldn't do it themselves. They decided she had to die on her own. They drove to the first village they could find and threw the baby in the river. At least it was in a box. By a happy coincidence, the box was fished out in time by local women. Lucy and Kevin put on a comedy act. Lucy sobbed on camera, cursing those who had stolen her only kidney. Kevin promised to tear to pieces those who did this to his best friend's daughter. The girl was never found. Maybe they weren't looking for her. Gradually, things quieted down. Lucy and Kevin became full-fledged business owners, at the same time pretty far away from this Colorado. One family made the decision to adopt or foster a child. More, of course, the wife wanted it. But the husband wasn't opposed to it either. They were very fortunate to be offered a child. The main thing is a perfectly healthy girl. The couple quickly settled all the formalities and became parents. True, the father very quickly realized that all this he does not like, and that he is used to be in the house of the Maine. And now the main thing is some dog. And it wasn't even his own. Now Nancy looked at him with uncomprehending eyes. Vanessa already had her hand on the pike. It was like she was waiting for something, and nothing happened. Nancy could feel it in the air too. That anticipation. Just like that, she didn't understand anything. She felt a steady gaze on her. Turned around. It wasn't hers that was watching, staring very intently, and Nancy suddenly got a chill inside. How could it be possible for a girl stranger to look at her the way Benjamin had once looked at her? Nancy started to rise from the chair, but her legs would not hold her. "Sam, tell me, is the girl who was thrown into the river and the one who was adopted the same girl?" Vanessa slammed her palm on the table. "Well, finally. Ethan, get the valerian quickly. I have a feeling I'm going to need it now." Ethan disappeared and then reappeared. Nancy hadn't seen him at all, hadn't noticed when he'd appeared at the table the first time. There was silence in the room. Ringing and heavy. Nancy looked at Adriana. Tears were running down the girl's cheeks. "So you didn't leave me," Nancy, who had finally realized everything that had just been said, jumped up and covered Adriana with herself. "I won't give it to my daughter. I won't give it to you." Then burst into tears and sat on Adriana's desk and hugged her mom. "Mommy, come on, you'll never stop being a mom to me." Nancy was crying too. Then Adriana hugged Natasha with one arm, and with the other Nancy smiled through her tears. Why? Is it possible to have two moms in our state? Lucy's trial was loud because Nancy was to be acquitted at the same time. That hearing was public. It was so crowded there was no place to sit. A family that everyone in town knew. A lot of people remembered that first case, the first time a young girl had been locked up, and most of them realized they'd locked her up for nothing. Nancy both drove her eyes around. She felt confidently dressed now. Nancy was fresh-faced. Adriana sat next to her, and Nancy sat next to her. They had been able to agree that day that they would make Angelina's life easier with their love, rather than make it harder with a showdown. Adriana was fine with that in general. First of all, she was madly glad that her mother had not abandoned her, that she had found her mom, that she was near her now. Secondly, she was near the person whom she had thought of as her mother since childhood, and now she couldn't think of her mother any other way. Sam sat at Nancy's right hand. He immediately sat down like that, and Nancy immediately blushed. She didn't realize what was happening to her. Not a young girl to blush, still blushed every time. Vanessa nudged her husband Science, the man who was not wrong. Say your predictions about Nancy and Sam. Ethan shrugged his shoulders indifferently. Sam proposed to her today. Vanessa was taken aback. What makes you think that? And so confidently. Vanessa looked at her husband in surprise. The devil knows. And suddenly he really guesses Xenia, in the form of confusion on the face of his wife, could hardly restrain laughter. Today, they went with Sam to buy a ring for the event. Lucy had been given a full ride. As she was led away, she screamed curses at Nancy, spitting and whispering like a snake. Nancy looked at her in horror. God, what does money do to people? They stepped outside and Nancy breathed in the air. Well, now that I am now full mistress of my home again, I invite everyone to visit. We should celebrate this and the many other things that have happened. They pulled into the store and headed towards the house. The evening was progressing. Beautiful men were grilling meat. The women were chopping salads, delicious wine, a bonfire, wicker chairs. Oh, where's Adriana? Nancy jumped up, searching for the girl with her eyes. Suddenly, a violin melody so beautiful and so sad, taking the soul. Sam stood up. Everyone surrounded Nancy. The woman looked at them. Vanessa, smiling at his wife, smiled at Nancy and smiled. Adriana, who was playing the violin, approached. Nancy saw that she was smiling as well. Nancy even looked around herself. She might get dirty. But then Sam appeared in the clearing like a wizard. He silently placed a bouquet of white roses at Nancy's feet, knelt down and handed her a ring box. If you don't become my wife, I'll die. Nancy looked at him fearfully. Had he forgotten she was a bunny? No, he hadn't. Men like Sam don't forget anything. Agree. Nancy looked at Adriana in surprise. It was the first time the girl had called her. Nancy nodded her head and immediately fell into Sam's arms and cried. Was it really impossible to believe? Had the black streaks ended? She sought out her daughter. Her daughter forgave her and called her mom. She'd been proposed to by the man she loved with all her heart. She didn't have time to speculate because Sam yelled, "No, ladies, that's not gonna work. I'm gonna go get a spring in everyone's step." Nancy took a look at all the women and realized that everyone was crying. The sight was so unusual and comical that she laughed. Vanessa followed her, then Adriana, and then Nancy couldn't take it anymore. When the men returned, wine glasses in hand, they almost fell over. Now those women who had been sobbing 3 minutes ago were laughing. So watch out for a fall. The men looked at each other, and Sam said, "Let's just wait. This madness has to end sometime." Ethan nodded. They settled down on the grass, stories lazily sipping their wine, looking at the women laughing.
Subscribe and click the bell.
A young mother sold herself dearly for the sake of her son, agreeing to the chief's unusual proposal. And after a while, the employees were dying of envy. Long before these events, the outwardly prosperous life of the heroine gave a crack. Adriana was very happy. It had happened. She had just become the wife of the man she loved. The two of them with Michael came out of the registry office after the registration of marriage. Registration was ordinary, without witnesses, veils, and Mendelssohn's March. Solemn wedding ceremony Adriana did not want, as she did not like wedding hype. And there were no more friends. All her friends married Photius, and in white wedding dresses came to the registry office in a cortege of several decorated cars. Adriana had even been a witness at 2 such weddings in her early youth and had grown very tired of the noise of the clamor. She was an introvert, not interested in company, and she didn't drink alcohol at all. But at the wedding, she had to. And the morning after drinking, Adriana felt disgusting. She had a headache, upset stomach, so she preferred simple food, lots of dancing, and going on a trip instead of all this marriage madness. Adriana's parents supported her every endeavor as long as their daughter was happy. They no longer hoped that she would get married, but still it happened. Out of boredom, she met a young man on the internet. They dated for over a year and decided to finally get married. Now, Adriana was wearing a champagne-colored silk long dress with a beautiful neckline and sleeveless, sewn in the atelier of a dressmaker she knew. Her hairstyle her hairdresser had done beautifully, since she had tried to intricately style her curls. Adriana had naturally dark curly hair, but the master so poured lacquer and twisted them that they stuck out like spirals. And after the gala, it was hard for Adriana to wash off so much lacquer, but she managed, though with difficulty. Adriana herself was a tall, dark-haired brunette, not skinny, but not underweight either. Her hair was both a source of pride and agony. Pride because it was naturally clogged with flour, because styling it was quite difficult if you didn't pick the right product. And they also got married if the shampoo didn't work. Adriana and Michael walked out of the registry office holding the marriage certificate and headed to Adriana's car. Yes, she drove Michael to the registry office by herself. In an old red Ford Halo. Adriana was convinced that an independent woman herself makes her own destiny, and there is no need to wait for someone or something that favors you to help you help yourself. With this motto she, in general, and lived. Not far from the registry office, there was a photo studio where the newlyweds decided to look in and leave a memory of the significant day of their lives. A young girl photographer made them pose differently, and in the end they got 10 good shots, with which Adriana and Michael were satisfied. After the photo shoot, the tired newlyweds went to a cafe where they had booked a table in advance. The waiter brought champagne, and they started celebrating for us. Michael raised his glass and, smiling, looked at Adriana. To us, Adriana was happy. She would be married. And finally, her colleagues at work would stop judging about her and match her with different bachelors. Let's go to Europe on our honeymoon. Remember, I sent you the mega tour. Yes, very interesting tour program. Vienna, Paris, Prague, Dresden, Karlovy Vary. He'll tell you so much, but won't it be hard? The bus says there's no overnight travel. Somewhere in Europe overnight, and then from there we go to Prague. 1 night in a hotel in Paris, and the rest in Prague. Well, let's go to this company tomorrow. I want to see the tour program in detail and talk about the price. Okay, then we will take the money and pay for the tour at once, answered Adriana. I bought a great camera. I'll take it with me. We should get some great pictures, something to look back on later, said Michael. I'm already looking forward to this trip. It's going to be great. The next day, Adriana and Michael went to the travel agency to book the trip. The manager showed them all the hotels they would be staying in and answered all their questions. Can you tell me, while traveling by bus, when will there be stops, sanitary stops? Every 3 o'clock at gas stations you can buy something and go to the toilet. That's great. They have paid toilets in Europe, don't they? Yes, except in France there are free public toilets. There will be a lunch stop in Poland. Thank you. We were getting worried about the long wait. The longest journey will be in the evening, but you'll be taken to a hotel where you can rest until morning and have breakfast. All right, let's book. Okay, said the manager. Now I'll fill out the contract and print it out. You carefully read and sign here and here. The girl started to fill out the contract on the computer. After 10 minutes, she printed out all the copies and let me sign. Adriana signed, handed over the money, and received a receipt for payment. The bus leaves at 5 o'clock. From the Drama Theater building, you will see 3 big tourist buses with the Mega Tour sign. Thank you. We have understood everything. Let's go to pack, said Adriana. Visas will be ready in 3 weeks. We will call you. We will wait for the call. Adriana gave the manager their passports. Packing was a pleasant experience. Comfortable shoes and clothes, suitcases and backpacks were bought. Dry rations were also stocked. Coffee and tea, they were told, would be on the bus. On the morning of the day of departure, a cab brought them to the Drama Theater. There they saw 3 large buses with green-blue stripes. Tourists with children and belongings were already crowding near the buses. All the cars had open luggage compartments, and the drivers were placing passengers' suitcases and bags there. The leader of their group was marking everyone who had arrived on their list. Adriana and Michael also approached her to have her check them in. Adriana was worried that they were gone and would have to go home with their belongings. That would be a shame. Are you Adriana? Yes. Your number 2 bus, seats 20 and 21. They're just about to put your luggage on the bus. You can go ahead and take your seats. Bring water and a snack and mugs in the cabin. In 300 hours, there'll be a stop. We'll have tea, coffee. Thank you. We'll get on the bus. Adriana took Michael's hand. Alex's guide will be on the bus with you. She should be arriving now, and I'll take the other bus. And Michael handed the suitcases to the bus driver under the sign too. They took backpacks and inflatable neck pillows with them in the cabin, so they could sleep relatively comfortably. One by one, the buses were filled with passengers. The luggage compartments were closed, and the convoy set off. Most of the way passed by big cities, often through woods and across fields. The first stop was at a gas station, almost near the border. All the passengers got off the buses to stretch their legs, go to the toilet, wash their hands, and buy something to eat in the cafe. Michael and Adriana got off too. The parking lot was about half an hour. Having done their business, they decided to take a walk. Near the gas station there was a flower bed, in the center of which there was a jug, and flowers as if poured out of its wide neck. It looked very beautiful. Adriana photographed it as a memento of the trip. Michael didn't take any pictures of anything, just walked around and stretched his legs. The next stop was at the border with Poland. Their buses were first checked by border guards. They collected everyone's passports and returned them after some time with a stamp with the date of departure. Customs officers followed. They made everyone get out of the bus, went inside, and examined something. Having found nothing, and having checked the documents of the group leader, the bus was let through. The cars went to the western border of Poland, where there was a transit hotel. It was already dark, and the passengers one by one fell asleep. Michael and Adriana got ready to sleep. They fell asleep quickly enough. The road was smooth. The engine was quiet, and in an hour everyone was asleep. We arrived at the hotel around 12 o'clock. Everyone was tired and sleepy. We checked in at the reception and dragged our suitcases to the room. The room was quite spacious but cool. Adriana was grateful to sleep in a bed where she could stretch her legs out, which she did with pleasure. Michael took a long shower, and when he came out, Adriana was already asleep. In the morning, all the campers went out for breakfast, which consisted of scrambled croissants, toast, sausages, and coffee. We had 45 minutes for breakfast, and the bus had to move on. The last suitcases were loaded into the luggage compartment. The driver closed it, got behind the wheel, and the bus pulled onto the road. The next part of the journey was coming up. Prague. It was 4 o'clock. All the tourists were excited about the magnificent views. The bus dropped them off at the Royal Gate. Here they were met by a local tour guide, Betty. She had lived in Prague for 25 years and had been driving tours for the last few years. She gathered the whole group and led them into Prague Castle through the gate down a powerful alleyway. Street musicians sat on the sides, each playing something. People were throwing coins into cases and hats. The group walked down and stopped. What they saw shocked them. It was St. Vitus Cathedral, a tall, majestic gray stone cathedral in the Gothic style. All the tourists took out their cameras and started taking pictures of the cathedral. Michael also took a few pictures from different angles. Adriana was delighted, but that was just the beginning of the tour. They followed Betty around for a long time. They each had an audio guide where they could clearly hear what she was telling them. Betty had a flag in her hand that she held up when she stopped. It was easy to find the group by it. It fell a little behind while taking pictures. We walked through Old Square, walked across Charles Bridge, and saw the Gunpowder Tower. My legs were buzzing, but I didn't want to stop. Then the whole group was taken to a transit hotel and told to reconvene at 400. Everyone was down by 4, got on the bus, and drove again to Prague. Alex told them how to use the subway, what station to get off at. She said that the pass is valid for a certain time, and if you don't get there before that time, you can be fined. Took all the tourists to a money changer with a normal exchange rate, where they changed dollars into Czech crowns. Tourists were taught how to identify a road or cafe by the cost of a mug of beer or cup of coffee. Here it was called gentleman's. Adriana took Michael by the hand and dragged him down a small street to look for a suitable gospoda for dinner, not one of the houses. In the alleyway they saw steps, going down and a sign by which we realized it was the Gentleman's Cafe. Went downstairs and got into a hall with a wooden floor, wooden tables and chairs. The ceiling was dome-shaped and high. A chandelier made up of beams and lamps hung overhead. Michael chose the Vapurny and icons on the menu, along with the famous Czech beer Kozel. When the waiter brought them a huge roasted pork leg, which was fixed in a special device and stood on a tray on which there was a knife and a rosette with sauce, Michael took the knife and cut a chunk of meat from the leg. It was more tender than Isham, and there was something primal about cutting meat off a pig's leg. Smelling of the fire and the cave, they enjoyed the meal and fellowship. Michael, this is delicious. It's a knee-high boar. Adriana rolled his eyes in enjoyment. Yes, I really liked it too. We'll have another one tomorrow. Michael drank beer. The beers here are great. I liked the beer too. I liked all the food. And Prague. And we've only seen a little bit of it. There's another tour tomorrow. Betty said we won't walk so much. We'll drive. When are we going to Carlsbad? The day after tomorrow, Adriana answered. Then Vienna, then Dresden. Wow, so we'll visit several countries. Yes, in Poland, Czech Republic, Austria, Germany, and France, answered the young wife. How exciting. I never dreamed of it. But the dreams came true. Michael was very impressed by the daytime views of Prague, its color. To get to the hotel, it was necessary to go a few stations on the Prague subway and the subway trains. The doors did not just open. At the stations, you had to push a button that was right there on the door. The carriages were very bright, and there were free seats. Adriana immediately sat down on one of them to relieve some of the pressure on her legs. Our stop, Adriana. Michael touched her arm. Come on, I'm so sleepy. What time do we get up tomorrow? 7. Tomorrow we leave for Karlovy Vary at 7:30. They went to the supermarket and bought some ham, cheese, and juice. They continued their meal in the room. There was a small refrigerator in the hallway where they could put the food. What we didn't eat, we put away there. Both of them were in a happy and playful mood. Adriana embraced Michael, began to kiss him, and they merged in a burst of passion on the bed in a transit hotel room somewhere on the outskirts of Prague. They both woke up only when the alarm clock rang. They jumped up quickly. Let's hurry up and start breakfast. I'll just brush my teeth and make up my mind. Adriana pulled on her jeans. She was wearing a semi-transparent blouse and jacket, Jean Scoop. I've already brushed. I'll even have time to shave. Yes, you and I are perfect campers, Adriana replied. The whole group was already eating breakfast. Michael poured both of them coffee from the coffee maker and brought ham, cheese, and toast. Many of the campers in their group had already eaten breakfast and were walking outside to the bus. Michael even snatched a sandwich as he walked. As he left, he still had time for a glass of juice. Adriana drank her coffee and wrapped the sandwich in a napkin and took it with her. Alex, their guide and group leader, smiled at them on the bus. She was a young, blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl. She had an easy character and was a good organizer. Everyone settled into their seats and the bus headed to Karlovy. It was not even 2 o'clock when they arrived. Carlsbad greeted them with a light rain. We had to go buy raincoats for the whole group. The old Chinese man, in whose small store the whole group bought raincoats, had probably made the day's revenue plan and was rubbing his hands together contentedly. Karlovy itself was astonishing in its appearance of the canal. Along the banks on the upland stood 4, 5, 6-story smart hotels. There was even an old and scary-looking hotel from the Soviet times, where on the roof there was a pool with thermal water. Those who wished could swim in the pool. Michael and Adriana were happy to do so. It was very pleasant to dip in the hot water when it was only +15 outside. My mouth was steaming and my ears were cold. In the middle of Karlovy, a river flowed in the stone banks, warm. Some hotels stood right on its banks, reminiscent of Venice. From Alex, they learned that Karlovy is famous for its normal springs and drinking mineral water. Their 12 bustets with 6 springs were arranged in a large cloister. The springs are numbered and depending on the doctor's prescription. The patient drinks water from the spring under a certain number. There are a total of 5 such colonnades in the city. In a separate hall was the outlet of the hot spring. Periodically, it burst to the surface with a large column surrounded by steam, and then the air around became moist and warm. All the tourists drank healing water from the Liberty Spring, where water can be drunk by everyone. It was not in the colonnade, but in a freestanding whitewashed gazebo. Michael and Adriana found a cafe that Alex had recommended to them. It served a special wine, the taste of which could not be described in words. It was not like ordinary champagne, more like ordinary wine, but it was sparkling and with a light floral flavor. After the cafe, wet and happy tourists got on the bus. Adriana bought a rock crystal bracelet for her arm on the way. Round, sweet, thin apples, waffles, and a bottle of interlocking. It's also called the 13th spring in Carlsbad. The bracelet sparkled pleasantly and was a delight to behold. In the evening, we headed back to Prague. At a great time for walking. Prague was buzzing and interrupted by the lights of lanterns and agency glass storefronts. Tourists walked in groups and singly. A colorful cafe caught their eye along the way. They were tired of counting and noticing the sights. It was such an impression that they were put in a box with a painted beautiful city, with many beautiful squares, buildings, alleys, and embankments. Adriana couldn't believe what was happening, and just with her eyes wide open, absorbed the impressions. At the cafe, the Czech owner suggested they try some Levko soup with mushrooms. He brought a bottle of wine and glasses. For the second course, he advised to take coffee for the couple. The Czech brewed in a Turk, since, according to him, the coffee machine had died. In the corner of his cozy cafe stood a wooden chest, filled to the top with corks from wine bottles. I wondered how many bottles of wine must have been drunk to fill the chest. Michael and Adriana were falling more and more in love with this city. They had a trip to Dresden the next day, and Vienna the day after that. So after the cafe, they went to the supermarket again and bought a full bag of all sorts of skewers and, of course, wine. When they got to the room, they opened a bottle and, sitting in the armchairs, saw off the past day with glasses in their hands. In the morning, they managed to get up before the alarm clock and quietly get ready. They went down to the restaurant. Even before all the members of the group arrived, they had a quiet breakfast and even had to wait outside for the bus for a while. 2 o'clock to Dresden passed quickly. On the way, we stopped at a gas station, where you had to pay €1 to enter the toilet, but then you could buy $75 worth of goods in the store. Adriana bought chili pepper chocolate. She had never tasted such an unusual kind of chocolate. In Dresden, they visited the Zemfira Opera, visited the Royal Palace Winger, in the ponds of which swam large, colorful goldfish. Michael went from one place to another to capture everything better. Adriana just looked at everything, breathed deeply, and thanked the universe for this trip. She felt better than ever. They were led to a square where there was a church that had been razed to the ground and then completely rebuilt in 2005. There were flecks of the original stones in the masonry of the church, which the people of the town had carefully preserved and then brought to the construction. It looked touching and unusual dark stones in the middle of light-colored masonry. All the way back, they were browsing and sorting where bad photos were deleted. Adriana was taking photos in Wenger Park on the Brule Terrace. It was a sunny day, and one could pose for her husband. They went into a cafe. It was in a real castle with a luxurious interior. Inside, the walls were dark blue, framed by a white ceiling and white geometric pattern. A painting of a landscape hangs on the entire wall. From below, the walls are decorated with oak paneling. On the ceiling, crystal chandeliers hung in a row. All the furniture in the cafe was wooden. There were various incredible cakes on display, and Renee wanted to try them all. But the budget was tight. So she and Michael agreed to get different cakes and let each other try them. The cakes were brought to them with a cup of latte coffee each. It was interesting to sit and look at the interior, the different paintings and molding on the walls and ceiling. Adriana took a piece of cake with such a creamy layer and orange jelly, and Michael took a cherry, chocolate one. They tasted each other's desserts. They were incredibly delicious, with a nice combination of sweet and sour. And there was plenty of both, and I wanted to eat more and more. But good things, as they say, a little bit at a time. Adriana thought that saying was unfair. There should be plenty of good things, and a little of the bad. That would be much better for everyone. Nevertheless, the day was coming to an end, and it was time to return to Prague. The next day, the buses whisked them away to Vienna. Along the way, they drove through Germany, marveling at the neat buildings and manicured lawns with councillors. And when the road went through Bavaria, they didn't have time to oohing and awing. It seemed that from behind the trees would pop out elves or fairies. So fairy-like was the scenery. They were driving along a mountain road, and neat red roofs of houses could be seen below. The forest around them was very beautiful and mysterious. Michael, look, there is a village or a small town in the distance. I see all the roofs are red, and there's a forest all around. And they have a river running in the distance. It's a very beautiful place. Vienna was met with rain and gloomy skies. St. Stephen's Cathedral stood out with its Gothic arrows in the center of the old part of town. We won't get a picture today. Do you think it's so gloomy? There's no light to match. I'm taking pictures as I go. We can't leave without pictures. We're going to Viborg. There's a butterfly museum there. Maybe there's good lighting there. We arrived at the winter residence of the Austrian Habsburgs. Holbrook, it was a large castle with various sculptures and a large park. It takes up a whole neighborhood in the center of Vienna, said Alex, who loved the complex. There are up to 30 individual sites to see. I don't know if we have time for all of them. Let's at least see most of it. See, we'll try to keep up. Michael's got his camera at the ready. Michael, we've already filled 2 memory cards with photos, but we still don't have enough, Adriana said. They passed through the famous Swiss Gate. This was the name of a beautiful red and gray arch with a royal coat of arms on top and golden inscriptions in Latin. In Viborg, there is the National Austrian Library. There is also a museum of Sisi, so-called Elizabeth, the Bulgarian wife of Emperor Franz Joseph I. Her life was full of tragic events, and it is worth a separate story. However, you can easily find it all on the internet. Separate apartments were provided for each member of the imperial family. Today, some of these rooms are closed. They are used as offices of statesmen, and some of them have been turned into museums. They walked through several rooms, including the audience hall where Emperor Franz Joseph received visitors. The walls and furniture in the room were red with gold, the doors white with gold. The interior of the room was decorated in the Rococo style. Very light, graceful, moderate, but at the same time rich, emphasizes the officiousness of the meetings and the graciousness of the Emperor Alex. Fun, and yet detailed about each room in the palace. Aren't you tired yet? Tired. The tourists howled in unison. Then let's get out slowly. Further, there are insignificant rooms with similar interior. Downstairs, the Butterfly Museum awaits us. There's a separate entrance fee. They went down a marble staircase. Take my camera and I'll walk around here. Michael handed Adriana his camera and sat down on a bench near the palace. Adriana went inside the Butterfly Museum. It was very hot and humid inside. The lens was instantly wanting. I had to listen to it with a special cloth. Big beautiful butterflies flew down for treats spread out on a plate, slices of banana and apples. Separately, there was a glass cabinet where cocoons, in which future butterflies matured, hung on wooden sticks. Adriana searched among the leaves of tropical plants for mating beauties. She saw monstrosities on a leaf from a cool wallet with blue and pink eyes painted on its wings. She managed to get a picture of it before it flew away. The further excursion was by bus. They were driven around to a fault and told about the sights. In the square, they saw standing facts. The horses were beautiful and well-groomed. There are about 150 acres in Vienna, and a third of the coachmen are ladies. Alex smiled and winked. Each cabman has either a green or red card. The green one gives you the right to drive out on even-numbered days, and the red one on odd-numbered days. This is how the authorities solve the problem of finding a parking space. Not everyone, of course, is happy with it. What can you do? What beautiful horses. Michael, take a picture. I'll try. It's not very good in motion. We're going to stop now, and we can take pictures of the facts and with the facts. Alex smiled again. Let us wait. All the tourists filled out into the square and scattered each to the fact that they liked the most. The horses were white nits and crows in apples. Each had a different design on the horse's eyes. When the horses were resting, the cabman would cover them to the fullest. Adriana loved horses very much. Since she was a child, she watched movies about them and approached the horses that grazed in the village. Adriana's grandmother was a stable boy at one time. Apparently, that's where this love comes from. In Adriana's mind, a horse was the most intelligent and loyal animal. The bus arrived in Prague late in the evening. We didn't go to the supermarket. We decided to finish what was in the fridge. There was a raw half bottle of wine. We drank the wine and cheese, went to bed, and 10 minutes later slept like a dead man. Both were overwhelmed with impressions. Their group was to go to Paris for the weekend. The bus of another carrier was leaving from the bus station in Karlovy Vary. They were to take the subway to the bus station in Prague, and from there to Karlovy Vary. They had to check out of the hotel at 2 o'clock. The day was spent packing and going to the singing fountain in the center of Prague. The performance was very impressive and stirred the senses. To classical and contemporary music. In the air sighed powerful jets of water, which danced, became small, then again big, jumped out one by one, and to the beat of the music. All this, illuminated by multicolored spotlights, was very spectacular. You know, we've been here only 5 days, and it seems to me that half of my life has passed. So many impressions. Adriana was packing her suitcase, checking to see if she had forgotten anything. There are hundreds of photos alone. Look, you look so disgruntled. Who spoiled your mood? It wasn't me. Asked my husband. Maybe it's who knows. It was windy and my hair was in my eyes. I don't like it so much. That's why I was bracing myself. I guess. Why don't you look at your picture? Do you look like Mr. Bean on a walk? Oh yes, Mr. Bean, Mrs. Bean. Would you care to explain what you mean by that? Said Michael. You've got a look on your face like you've swallowed a hat without salt. Well, I didn't swallow it. All right, I'll watch my face. My suitcase and backpack are ready. Will you put the razor and deodorant away tomorrow? I'm gonna shave. Sorry, I wasn't thinking. It's not like you shave every day. Every day. It's an all-night drive, and I don't know when I'll be able to do it. I don't want to scare the French women with my appearance. Michael, pleased with his joke, grinned. Adriana pretended that she had heard it more than once and continued to tuck in her clothes. Soon she was done. There was still time to get a good night's sleep. Tomorrow they had a long drive to the bus station, and then to Karlovy Vary. They got there without adventure. The bus driver had a doggy on the dashboard who shook his head at the bumps and potholes. It was fun to watch her. In Carlsbad, they stepped onto the platform and saw a large tourist bus with tinted windows. It would take them to Paris. This bus was much more comfortable than the one that was taking them to Prague. Everyone settled into their seats. The guide came in and said hello. Hello, my name is Kathy. I live in Germany and accompanying sometimes such buses on the road. I will tell you about the sights of Paris and the rules of the tour and your behavior. During the trip, you will be offered coffee or tea, and also in Germany grilled Bavarian sausages. There is a restroom on the bus, but I don't recommend using it. It is for emergencies. We will be stopping at a sanitary stop, gas stations, every 3-4 o'clock approximately. Any questions? Ah, yes. When and how much for the sausages? 5 o'clock. 1 sausage, €2. Wow. Europe. The bus started and Adriana dozed off in anticipation of seeing Paris. After 4 o'clock, the bus stopped in the parking lot. The drivers got out, pulled out a brazier, and started grilling sausages. There were quite a few people who wanted a hot meal. Will you have some? Michael looked enviously at the lucky ones who were gnawing on the coveted sausages, standing by the brazier. I'm not. But you go. Adriana realized that the man must be fed, otherwise he would be angry and irritable. Then I'll go. In the meantime, get some coffee. They sat just outside the coffee machine. Adriana took the crumbs and pressed the button twice. She sat down and waited for Michael. He came in satisfied, bought, and ate 2 large sausages. His stomach was jubilant. Germans are good at fried sausage. While there was a break, Adriana and Michael had time to drink their coffee and stretch their legs. The next restroom will be in France, and it's free. The stop will be at 500 hours. I'd like everyone to go out and get cleaned up. Paris loves the neat. The Kathy guide said this with a smile, looking around at all the passengers. Everyone sat down in their seats and drank tea and coffee. The drivers put away the brazier. Sitting back in her seat, the bus moved off. Paris was getting closer and closer. 5 o'clock the bus stopped, as promised, at the free toilet. All the women got out and started washing their faces, combing their hair, applying mascara to their eyelashes as if they were getting ready to go on a date. And not in vain. What they saw at 6 o'clock when they entered Paris struck their hearts forever. Paris was deserted in the morning. The French liked to sleep in, but this was a plus as the bus was able to drive unobstructed through all the streets. Passengers swiveled their heads left and right, seated to consider everything the best they could. They passed a building with lighted cans, windows of beautifully decorated stores. The Eiffel Tower and palaces could be seen in the distance. Paris was magnificent. On the bus sightseeing tour, they got an overview of the city, saw the main sights. They drove through Paris, got out and walked through the Latin Quarter, saw the Moulin Rouge and the White Cathedral. With Rocker, they walked around Montmartre, climbed the Montparnasse skyscraper, and looked down on Paris from the 60th floor observation deck. The view was amazing. Then they were taken to Cité Island and the Cathedral of Our Lady of Paris. Inside the cathedral was very majestic and dark. I didn't want to be in it for long. There was a small cafe on the square where our newlyweds headed. Michael and Adriana were able to grab a snack and coffee overlooking the cathedral. There was also a large public restroom underground. Each stall had a wash basin, which was very convenient. My hands were dirty, and it didn't hurt to wash my hands. "How nice to wash your hands in the center of Paris," Adriana said. I hadn't really thought about it, but I did, and it made me laugh. Adriana laughed. "I feel like Esmeralda." You know, it was hard for her to be medieval. Paris was still like that. "I don't know," Michael replied. "I didn't live in medieval Paris. Medieval Moors are worse." Michael took a picture of Adriana. The picture came out great. The sun was setting. It was golden hour. This photo they later printed out and put in a frame. Then they were promised to be dropped off near the home for the handicapped for a walking tour of the home for the handicapped. The central attraction was the tomb of Emperor Napoleon. The tombstone was made of red-brown marble and close to the body. The tomb was made of Karelian porphyrio. It was specially installed below the floor level so that anyone who wants to read the inscriptions would bow their head, saluting the late emperor. The House of Invalids is one of the hallmarks of Paris. Here, even today, live pensioners and veterans who have devoted themselves to the service of the motherland. Our next destination is the Rodin Museum. "Follow me, don't be defensive." The group followed the guide. The tourists scattered around the museum looking at the sculptures. Creations made of bronze and marble were displayed in various halls of sculptures of different sizes, from small fragments to entire compositions. Rodin's talent was evident in everything. How subtly he depicted the expression on faces, with what precision the hands and hair were executed. Adriana loved the sensuality of the sculptural composition Eternal Spring. And of course, the thinker. Many of the sculptures were unfamiliar to her. Some caused a storm of feelings, some embarrassment, and some pain. All in all, there was a lot of impressions. Michael scrutinized and photographed Rodin's works. In the courtyard, their attention was attracted by a sculpture of Balzac. "Oni," said the guide. In the evening, they were released to walk along the Champs-Élysées. It's a very long street. First, Adriana and Michael climbed the Arc de Triomphe. From there, they had an excellent view of the Champs-Élysées and part of Paris. Real estate prices are very high here. There are barely 6 people in all of Paris who live here permanently. But here you can rent an office for €2 to meet important guests, or rent a mailbox for only €100. Kathy talked about the peculiarities of the street. "I see stores and crowds of people." Adriana was taking pictures of the views. "Adriana, let's take a picture of the view of the Arc de Triomphe from here," said Michael. "Oh, you found a gorgeous view. Here we go." Late that night, they were brought to the Manhattan Hotel. The couple was very tired. On the way, they stopped at a local convenience store. Adriana had learned French at school and understood almost all the words and even started to speak. At the store, they bought Normandy Camembert, natural yogurt, and a bottle of orange juice. The clerk suggested they choose a bottle of wine. Michael chose the Prosecco. He had wanted to try it for a long time. Adriana was fine with it. The wine was not strong. Having a glass before going to bed was fine. "We haven't had wine in Paris yet." Michael was in a wonderful mood. "We'll remember this evening. We will remember our trip with you in the long winter evenings." Adriana was nestled in a chair with her legs tucked up. "And the weather is not hot, just right for hiking. Only in this part of Paris, I wouldn't want to walk at night." Kathy warned that Paris is divided into neighborhoods, and there are some where it is better not to walk at night. It's best not to push your luck. In the old part of Paris, there were quite a few Afro-descendants on the streets. They cleaned the streets or sold souvenir keychains with the Eiffel Tower in miniature. At night, Adriana and Michael made long and passionate love. Paris. The magnetism was working. Adriana felt very whole and easily felt her femininity, her sexuality. She wanted Michael. He wanted her. What else do young people need to be happy? In the morning. At 9 o'clock, they had to go on an excursion to Versailles, and after lunch, the Louvre was waiting for them. A boat ride and dinner. They woke up without an alarm clock at 7 o'clock and began to take their time getting ready. They had to find the cafe where they were to have breakfast. It was on another floor, but which one did they forget? They had to look in the cheat sheet, thoughtfully made by Kathy. Aha, 8th floor. Adriana went first. Michael refused to go, citing a stomachache. Adriana didn't wait for him and found the cafe herself. She got herself an omelette, croissants, coffee. Paris was visible from the window. The sky was in a milky haze. There was no sun. Adriana felt an incredible burst of energy and happiness from the fact that she was now on the 8th floor of a hotel in Paris, drinking coffee and croissants and looking at the city. When she returned to the room, Michael was already dressed. They took the elevator downstairs together and walked out into the parking lot to their tour bus. Kathy had provided his number the day before, and for good reason. There were almost 3 identical buses in the parking lot. They were almost 2 o'clock on their way. They passed the Bologna forest, where they saw large rabbits grazing peacefully on the slopes. They were melancholically chewing grass and moving their ears amusingly. The bus pulled up to Versailles and stopped in a parking lot near other tour buses. They were given 4 o'clock to visit Versailles and were given audio guides so they could learn more about the sights. Palace of Versailles. The group entered through the large Golden Gate. The palace courtyard was filled with modern installations by artists. One depicted rusty arcs made of curved strips of metal by French conceptualist Bernard Venet. Do you think we'll get to see anything at Versailles in 400 hours? I think there's something. Remembering previous excursions, I realized that I had to go to Paris for at least a week to see at least 1/3 of the sights. Opening the lens, Michael replied, anticipating a lot of interesting things. Wow, and here you get a whole hell of a lot of rooms. But it's terribly uncomfortable. Imagine you're sleeping. Suddenly, the door opens and the courtiers march through your room. Maybe the king himself. Wouldn't I like to live in that time? They walked and walked through the Palace of Versailles. Each successive room was different from the previous ones. They were decorated differently with different furniture and lamps, different tables and carpets. There were many sculptures, post-drapery like frescoes. In one of the rooms they were struck by a magnificent royal throne, decorated with feathers, gilding and fringed draperies with embroidered floral motifs suspended high from the ceiling. From the windows, they could see the huge, beautiful garden of Versailles with its fountains and shapely carved lawns. Due to time constraints, Michael and Adriana didn't have time to walk around the garden. They could only admire it from the windows. Michael went on ahead, leaving Adriana to look at and photograph what she wanted. It was already time to get back on the bus. Kathy's guide had warned that those who were behind would be taking a cab to Paris, so she really didn't want to miss the bus. Sneaking between the tourists, going around them from different directions, she approached the exit. At that moment, 2 French women were hanging out in front of her, right in the doorway. Adriana tried in French to ask them to move away, but it was as if they didn't hear her. I had to go right at them and literally push them out of the way. Outside the door immediately were steps of light marble that merged into one. Adriana didn't notice and stepped wide. Just then, sitting down on the foot that had returned, she took care of her camera. The leg hurt badly. When she tried to stand up, she was able to do so with great difficulty. Wings very slowly, she found her way to the bus. Her leg was tearing with pain. Stepping on it was possible. Adriana entered the bus and immediately asked the driver for a bottle of water from the refrigerator, sat down, and applied it to her sore leg. The pain subsided. The bus pulled away from Versailles and headed towards the Louvre. They got almost to the Louvre, but the street was blocked off due to a bicycle race and the Tour de France. There was a large crowd of people, and there was a carnival procession of cars with platforms on which girls in colorful costumes were dancing. Everyone was cheering and shouting. The bus came as close as possible to the scene, and we had to walk across the bridge to the Louvre. Adriana heroically overcame this distance. There was more than enough to see in the Louvre for more than one day. Kathy suggested not to look at every painting or sculpture for a long time, but to find the most favorite one and stand near it. So we did that. But I really wanted to see the image of Mona Lisa hanging on the second floor. There was a long and wide marble staircase leading to the picture, and Adriana went up sideways, as it was very painful for her to go straight. After climbing the stairs, they entered the crowded hall and immediately found the Mona Lisa. A group of Japanese were standing near her, busily photographing a small painting placed behind armored glass. The glass gave glare, and the pictures were not quite good. Adriana experienced great disappointment. It was like Rembrandt's Madonna in the Dresden Art Gallery. There you could sit in front of it and look at it as long as you wanted. But here you could neither approach it, nor look at it, nor take a photo. The bus was finally able to pull in, which was a great relief. Adriana couldn't think of anything else like the pain in her leg. With great difficulty stopping, she walked down from the second floor and reached the exit. There was still a bus to catch. Michael supported her under his elbow. They got to the bus with no luck. Already in the car, it was much easier. The water in the bottle was still cold. They arrived at the ship where the promised dinner was to be held. Adriana didn't know how best to turn her leg so it wouldn't hurt, and she wished more than anything that she were in a hotel room. Instead, she was going to spend 10 o'clock on the bus, then 3 o'clock at the bus station in Karlovy Vary, then an hour on the bus to Prague, then on the subway. She tried not to think about it and concentrate on Paris. The banks of the Seine were littered with stone, some where there were platforms on one platform. On the opposite bank, there were figures made of sand. On another platform, there was music playing and couples dancing. It looked very beautiful. The French knew how to relax. We left Paris late in the evening, filled with the charm of this big city. The bus drove non-stop all night and brought them to the bus station in Karlovy Vary. This time it was sunny, and on such a day, Carlsbad looked festive and majestic. It was 3 o'clock before the bus to Prague. They wandered around the streets, drank water from a spring, got hungry. They went to a cafe not far from the bus station. There were only 2 tables in the cafe, but very tasty coffee and cakes. The bus going to Prague came with the same driver who was taking them here. The doggy was still shaking his head at every hub. When they got to the hotel in Prague, they went straight up to the room as they were tired. Michael later went out to the supermarket to buy food for dinner. They had dinner sometimes in the hotel room. Adriana's leg had turned dark red with a blue color. She instinctively lifted her leg up and placed it on the wall near the bed. "That's the kind of leg you have. We have to contact the insurance company and go to the hospital." Michael came in from the store and was horrified. "How badly does it hurt?" "It hurts and aching and swollen," Adriana answered her. The next day, the young woman called from reception to the phone number on her insurance policy. She was directed to a huge hospital complex on the outskirts of Prague. She had to take a cab. At the wheel was a young woman with a fashionable asymmetrical haircut. She drove them to the gate and wished them well. After struggling to get up to the second floor, they found themselves in a hospital corridor. They were called to see a doctor. The doctor examined the leg and referred Adriana for x-rays. The x-ray machine was in the next room. The pictures were immediately downloaded into the computer. After the x-ray, we had to wait for the doctor to come out and invited her to come in. There was no fracture, but there was a severe dislocation, sprained ligaments. In the office, at the doctor's request, the nurse put a special pain-relieving bandage ointment on Adriana's leg with an elastic bandage. The tube was given to Adriana to take with her. Here it was also suggested to buy crutches. The doctor adjusted the crutches to Adriana's height. He prescribed cold on the leg, to keep on top of bandages and to lubricate with ointment. They bought the ointment at a neighborhood pharmacy. Walking was much easier. From the hospital, too, they had to take a cab. When they arrived at the hotel, Adriana immediately lay down on the bed and put her legs up. It was easier for her that way, and her foot didn't drain as much. The shoes were comfortable with adjustable buckles, so there was no difficulty. According to the tour program, the group had several excursions to do in Prague. "How am I going to do the tours on crutches?" Adriana lamented. "If it hurts too much, we won't go anywhere." Michael put his arm around Adriana's waist and pulled her close to him. "I think I can handle it. I won't miss any excursions. I'll be flying on crutches ahead of the group." Adriana laughed as she pictured the scene. In the morning, they woke up before the alarm clock and had no problem getting ready and going out for breakfast. Some of the group had not gone on a tour, but had gone wandering around Prague on their own. It was not the first time they had been here. This time, they would take the subway to Wenceslas Square, and from there the bus would take them to the zoo. Michael and Adriana bought passes from a machine near the subway station. They went downstairs, and 20 minutes later, they were on Wenceslas Square. There was no bus yet, and tourists were sitting on benches in the square near the monument to Street Wenceslas. Behind the monument was the National Museum. The bus pulled up, and Michael and Adriana took their seats. The Prague Zoo covers an area of 58 hectares. There are 12 unique pavilions and more than 150 expositions. In total, there are more than 1,000 animals in the zoo. They belong to 650 species. Alex was telling the tourists about the upcoming tour. The zoo was really gorgeous. There was a flock of pink flamingos on the lake. It seemed like a pink cloud had descended there. Elephants were walking freely, sprinkling themselves with sand in the large aviary. Hippos swam in a pond. There was a separate pet exhibit next to the crocodiles. Adriana saw for the first time a cow with the colors of the prince's house. There were various pet sheep, horses, geese, chickens, ducks, turkeys. Ostriches were located separately. There was plenty of room for all the animals. Mountain goats climbed up natural mountains and watched the visitors from above. Giraffes grazed in a large area. Adriana and Michael really enjoyed watching the animals and taking pictures. You could catch many interesting moments from their lives. "Let me take a picture of you in front of the elephants." "Come on." And one more elephant for them is not superfluous. She appreciated your joke. "You're no elephant." They went home. When they got home, Adriana didn't go straight to her parents, but stayed with Michael in their apartment for a while. She didn't want to upset Mom and Dad. She didn't tell them anything on the phone, but she had to give them the souvenirs and tell them about the trip. After a week, Adriana pulled herself together. Her leg was almost painless, but she continued to rebel it and walked on crutches. Mom asked daughter, "What happened?" "A fracture, Mom." "No fracture, just a sprain." "A sprain." And somewhere she managed to move her leg. "At Versailles, Mom, nowhere else." Adriana laughed. "I have to, but there's nowhere else to expose it." "Mom, I brought you and Dad a bottle of balsam and some sweet chocolates and wafers." "Oh, thank you. Come and have tea with us." "Come on." They drank tea. Adriana told about her 2-week trip, talked about the peculiarities of different countries, their customs and habits of the inhabitants. Mom and Dad listened attentively and looked at the pictures. They liked everything very much. They were happy for their daughter. The usual everyday life began, but there were so many impressions that they were enough for 6 months and even more. Adriana worked as an accountant in a small manufacturing firm. There was a lot of monotonous work. She managed several sites and often came home late. Michael worked as a programmer at home, often traveling on business trips. Adriana prepared food for tomorrow in the evenings, left Michael, and took it with her. Week after week went by. On a sunny August day, Adriana realized that she was expecting a child. She was very happy and decided to share her joy with Michael immediately. He was on a business trip and would be arriving soon. She wrote him a message, "You have a surprise at home." A reply came right away. "What's the surprise? You want to tell me? I'm intrigued." She replied, "If you do, it won't be a surprise. I'm flying in tomorrow night. I am very curious to see what you have in store for me." Michael wrote back. In the morning, Adriana got up and didn't drink coffee. She didn't feel like it. She squeezed the juice out of an orange, drank it, made oatmeal. I took a boiled chicken fillet and a cabbage salad to work. I didn't feel like eating and was nauseous. Cabbage with lemon juice. It was the only thing I ate well. In the evening, Adriana tried not to be late and get home in time to prepare dinner. Michael's airplane was already in the air. Soon Michael walked into the house, set down his bag and package, and undressed. Adriana walked over and gave him a hug. "So what's your surprise?" "It will wait. The surprise first." "Okay." Michael washed his hands, sat down at the table, and eagerly began to eat. "I've been pregnant for 9 weeks. That's news. That means I'm going to be a dad." Michael got up and kissed Adriana. "When are you due?" "March. If it's good, it'll be good. Trust me. There's no reason for it to be bad." "Will it be a boy or a girl?" "It's too early to tell. You can usually tell at 15 weeks. I'm going to the doctor tomorrow for an ultrasound." "I can go with you tomorrow from 6, Michael suggested. "Not yet. I'd like you to be at the ultrasound when they look at the sex. Until then, our baby looks like an egg. I don't know anything about it, but I promise you I'll figure it out. Let me read up on embryo development." One of Michael's good habits was to be thorough in matters he didn't understand. He would read sources, think, draw diagrams. "We'll see soon enough. I don't want to eat anything apathetic, but you have to eat." "Don't do that." "He doesn't want to eat. You have to find something you like and eat it little by little, small portions," said the husband. "I'll try it. This is a new condition for me. I don't know what to expect. I wonder if it will be a boy or a girl," said Michael. "I'd like a girl, but I'd like a boy too." "All right. Aha, it's a deal. You take it to the hospital and you'll be a real father." "Of course, I'll be the best father in the world." They were already lying in bed and discussing the future together with the child, not knowing yet what surprise fate was preparing for them. In January, Adriana went on maternity leave. Her belly was already clearly visible. She bought maternity clothes, special pants with a wide waistband, and a hoodie. On her feet, she had to buy soft suede boots without a lock because her feet were cut off. Adriana went to the doctor for another appointment. "Adriana, do you have a bad urine sample? Any back pain?" "No. You need to see a urologist. He's on the 4th floor. Please come up. Let him see you without waiting in line. I'll write up a referral." "I'll write up a referral." "Okay." Adriana took the elevator to the 4th floor. There were 2 patients sitting at the urologist's door. Adriana felt uncomfortable walking in front of them. But the gynecologist insisted, so she decided to ask to go ahead. But she saw that the woman also had bellies, so she decided to sit and wait her turn. Next, the door to the office fell open, and a nurse looked out. "Come in. What do you have?" "Here, gynecologist sent tests bad." "Show me your tests. It's really not a happy picture. Anything else bothering you?" "Sometimes my back hurts. Will you have to be hospitalized?" "Here's a referral. Go tomorrow. You can't delay. It could affect the baby's health." "I understand. Now I'll take the card to the gynecologist. Have a good day. Call the next patient, please." "I will." Adriana walked out of the office as if she'd been drowned in water. Yes, her lower abdomen tightened and her back ached occasionally, but there were no other symptoms. And then you get a bad test and a hospitalization. She gave her card to the gynecologist, picked up her exchange card, and went home. Michael was home when she got there. "They told me to go to the hospital. Dear Hugo, something serious." "Yes, a bad urine sample. They said it's urgent or it'll hurt the baby." "It's necessary. It's necessary. I can handle it. Don't worry. If you need anything, you call me. You'll take a cab tomorrow." "No buses. I get it. I'm upset." Adriana wanted to go through the whole pregnancy without hospitals, but it didn't work out. "I'm just gonna have to deal with it." She didn't eat breakfast this morning, just drank some water. What if the hospital wanted to take a test on an empty stomach? Things were packed in a bag. All that was left was to get dressed and trained. And being afraid helped Michael. Adriana had a hard time bending over. A cab was waiting near the entrance. Michael carried the bag and helped Adriana into the car. He himself was dressed and went with her. He was very concerned about his wife's condition. Adriana looked calm outwardly. They arrived at the maternity hospital quickly. The car pulled right up to the waiting room. Michael got out and took the bag from the driver and helped Adriana out. There were several other women in the waiting room with their husbands. Michael took a seat next to Adriana and put his arm around her shoulders. "Michael, I have to go. This woman will come out now and I'll go. I'll wait for you. Cheers." Michael. "All right." The previous woman came out. It was Adriana's turn. She came in, put her exchange card, passport, and referral on the doctor's desk. The nurse entered all the data into the computer and invited Adriana into the examination room. "You can go and change into your robe and slippers. Grab your bag and the nurse will take you to the post. They'll tell you which room you need to go to." "Okay, thank you." Adriana went out into the corridor, took slippers and a robe out of her bag, and started to change. She gave her coat, hat, and boots to her husband. Michael put everything in bags, "But you can all go home. We'll go to the ward now." "Okay, call if you need anything," the husband said. "I think I have everything, but it will be seen. Let's go." "Okay, bye." Michael patted Adriana on the shoulder and waved. The nurse led Adriana to the elevator, and the two of them went up to the second floor. There was a pathology ward filled with pregnant women with all sorts of disabilities. Some had been here for 3 weeks or longer. Some were already 6 weeks pregnant. The nurse at the post looked at the documents, wrote everything down in the journal, and said Ward 205 is on the right. "Go and settle down. You're on an empty stomach, right? Then you'll take a blood test now and a urine test tomorrow before 700 hours. Here's a jar and a label." "Okay." Adriana took her bag and went looking for room 205. She quickly found it and went inside. There was a woman sitting on a bed near the window talking on the phone. 2 of the beds were empty and were behind glass beds. Adriana chose the bed closer to the window. There was an iron nightstand beside the bunk. The woman put there all the necessary things: a mug, a spoon, toothpaste, and a toothbrush. She hung the towels on the headboard. The underwear was in a bag. She put it down, away from the wall, and Adriana remembered she had to go give blood. The woman at the window was talking and not paying any attention to her, so Adriana got up and walked out into the hallway. She approached the nurse's station. "Say, where do I have to go?" "To give blood at the end of the corridor, to the left there." Adriana reached the end of the corridor. There was a treatment room on the left. There were about 10 women standing by it. "Who is the last one to give blood?" Adriana looked questioningly at those present. "Aya." A thin woman in a purple robe and pink slippers stood against the wall. "I'm right behind you." Then Adriana looked around for a place for her to sit. She saw an empty seat on a bench, went, and sat down. The queue was going fast. Finally, she had to go too. The nurse drew blood very quickly, but it hurt her finger badly, and Adriana tried not to think about it. But the pain was bad enough. Adriana pressed the Vietka harder against her finger and wandered to her room. The woman at the window finished speaking. "I am Christina, and you are?" She was short in stature, dark-haired, and dark in color. Her hair was gathered into a neat bundle. "I'm Adriana. I wonder who we'll get. I don't know the third one. I've been in bed for 2 days, and only today they put you in. Let's call each other. It's very formal," Adriana suggested. "Come on." Christina smiled and immediately became very beautiful. "I have bad tests. The urologist sent me to the hospital, and so did I. I was put on drips for 5 days yesterday, And today I've already had a drip. You'll probably get one too. We'll see what the doctor says. What time do you usually make your rounds here? Adriana asked. It varies. Sometimes 9 o'clock. Sometimes later. You're early. You'll be on your rounds. Before she could say that, the door opened and 2 nurses came in. One was an attending physician. The other was the head of the department. Well, girls, tell me how you are doing. The attending physician looked at their charts. Everything was fine. They were dripping IVs. Christina was the first to tell me, but I had just been admitted and had recently taken a blood test. Adriana told her short story. I'll get you a cab. Owl, the nurse, will bring the drip now. You'll have to lie down for about an hour, so go to the bathroom. Okay, how many IVs do you need? At least 5. Then you'll get a urine sample, and we'll see you later. The doctors left and closed the door. I'm dizzy from Phil's cab. I can't get up after the IV, complained Christina Adriana. Wow, I'm gonna get dizzy too. You'll see, it doesn't happen to everyone. A nurse entered the room, carrying a tripod with an IV hanging from it. She told Adriana to lie down and inserted the catheter into her arm and adjusted the speed on it, and off she went. Will you call me when it's done? Okay, I'll get it for you right away, she said to Christina. She went out and came back about 10 minutes later. Christina already had the catheter in her hand with the same IV reading, so the nurse quickly attached the system and walked out. Christina pulled out a thick book and began to read. Can I give you a book? Yes, if I may. I didn't realize I had to get one. What should I read? Here you go. Christina threw the same book on Adriana's bed. And this detective, at least you'll be able to read books. While lying down, Christina smiled at Adriana. That's right. At home, I cannot get to read. It's late. I come home from work while I'm cleaning, cooking, and going to bed. When I went on maternity leave, I thought I would read, so I am always cooking, cleaning, going to the clinic, going to buy things for the baby. I've already bought a whole bag. Adriana was happy, smiling. Who's having a boy? Christina asked. Yes, a boy. The doctor at the ultrasound said he got a good look. That's great. I'm having a girl. I have 2 older sons, but that means there will be a favorite princess. My 2 older brothers are gonna be the protectors. And it's gonna be Daddy's favorite. Someone I know has 2 boys, and a girl was born. He's blowing the dust off her. I want my husband to want a girl, so he'll get one. Christina smiled broadly. Soon a nurse came in and removed the IVs. Both women breathed a sigh of relief. In 15 minutes, the canteen will be open. Let's go and get in line. Is there a line for the canteen? Adriana was surprised. Not everyone can fit. Some are eating, others are waiting. Then, of course, let's go and eat. The first ones. There were already 5 women outside the canteen. Christina and Adriana got in line and waited for the doors to open. Soon the door to the dining room opened, and they got in another line. In front of the window, there was a raskolnik with beef, mashed potatoes, and compote for lunch. Everyone had mugs, and they poured their own compote from the kettle. It was Christina and Adriana's turn. They took their plates and took 2 seats at a table. 2 other women joined them. It was strange for Adriana to see so many women in robes at the same time, but gradually she got used to it. Everyone had bellies. Some were fasting and holding their backs. They ate, poured compote into mugs, and went to the ward. Look, they're discharging someone. Come here. Christina was looking out the window with her elbows on the sill. Adriana came and stood next to her. Indeed, there was a car decorated with balloons downstairs. On it in big letters it said, "We have a boy." A woman and a man were fussing around it. They were fixing balloons, adding ribbons. I wondered who would walk in with the baby. A young dark-haired woman in a long black down jacket came out. She carried an envelope with an infant in it. A young dark-haired man walked next to her. He opened the car door and the young mother got in. Other women sat down beside her. The car started slowly and soon pulled into the gate. But here comes another young mommy taking up her duties. That's so sweet. My husband greeted me ceremoniously too, with my two older ones. And with my daughter, I'm afraid to imagine what will happen. That's great. He's so thoughtful. How does he manage at home with two? My mom helps him, so it's not so hard. She takes the younger one to kindergarten and picks him up. The older one goes to school on his own. My husband just helps him get ready. I see. I have my first. I don't know how I'll manage. It's scary how you'll handle it. While he's in the belly rest, Christina smiled and looked at Adriana. When's your due date? Late March 26th, I think. I'm due in early February. I'm in the last few weeks. The doctor's overreacting and decided to put me in the hospital. Yeah, they're taking the responsibility off themselves and putting it on the hospital doctors. Why is the pregnant woman under observation? What about tests? All the IVs. What's wrong with that? It's good. And less headaches. Less people coming in for appointments. That's right. At least 2 less. Adriana laughed. You and me in the hospital. The door opened, and a dark-haired woman with prominent eyes entered the room. She was carrying a bag and a package, and was dressed in a robe and slippers. I, Slaga, will now be in the same ward with you. Slaga's belly was not visible, but not all pregnant women do. Maybe it's a small period. And Olga, I'm Adriana. Nice to meet you. I was admitted to the hospital at 12 weeks, and I started poisoning. I don't know what will come of it. The doctors will figure it out. We're having dinner soon. Yeah, that's it. Out of the blue. I went to a doctor's appointment, and she sent me straight to the hospital. A nurse came in and gave Clara a referral for blood and handed out urine collection jars. Girls, please collect urine by 6 o'clock tomorrow. Remember what I said about hygiene? We do. Clara put things in the nightstand. Her hair was long and straight, gathered in a ponytail. Her face had wide cheekbones. She looked like some kind of oriental beauty. They spent their days taking IVs, walking the corridors of the hospital. A week later, Christina went into labor in the morning. A nurse came in, took Christina for a checkup, told her to pack her things, and move to the labor room. Well, girls, goodbye. Olechka, have a nice labor. Thank you, darlings. I'll write as soon as I can. But we'll be waiting. Christina left and Adriana was left alone with Clara. After 3 o'clock, a message came from Christina that a girl was born, weighing 3 kilograms, 250 grams, and 51 centimeters tall. Right, congratulations from us. Slaga was very happy. It will be great, my daughter. She has 2 sons. Wow. Now there will be 3 children. The girl will be carried in your arms. Yes. And you, Clara, you have other children. Yes, I have a son. He's 14 years old. I wanted to have another child, but probably not fate. We have a genetic disease on the female side of the family. I'm afraid that if we have a girl, we'll pass it on to her. I don't think about it. What if it's a boy? That's my only hope. But this is my 5th pregnancy. I can't bear it. It took a long time to carry my son too. He was a good boy. Maybe they'll keep this one too. One morning, Clara started bleeding. She was taken on a stretcher to the operating room, and then the nurse took her things and brought them to the room on the 6th floor, where she was lying after the operation. She lost the baby. Outflow, pregnancy. Christina, voted 2 weeks. Slaga was very fond of reading. She brought 5 books with her. They took turns reading them. The books were about love and detectives. The time in the hospital flew by. Michael had managed to go on 2 long business trips. Christina was replaced by a small, thin woman with a big belly. Hello, I'm Cindy. This is my bed. Yes, I'm Adriana, and I'm Cindy. Nice to meet you. I worked as a pediatrician at the clinic before my maternity, and I'm in accounting. Adriana remembered her reports and folders. You didn't want to let me go. and I'm in extra-departmental security." Clara looked very serious. Indeed, she was perfect for the role of security guard. They let me go. I had no choice. The ambulance took me away. The women flooded Cindy with questions about childcare and feeding the children their illnesses. Cindy was very outgoing and was happy to answer questions thoroughly. Adriana and Cindy had about the same due date and were discharged almost on the same day. Adriana came home, unpacked, and began to prepare for the arrival of the baby. The due date was exactly 1 month away. One morning, Michael was going to the office to take the signed documents and attend a meeting. Adriana sent another batch of the baby's clothes to the laundry. Suddenly, the contractions started. They were getting more and more frequent. "Michael, I'm going into labor. We have to go to the maternity hospital so suddenly." "Wait, I'll call the office to say I'll be there later. Let me help you." He helped Adriana change her clothes. And the boots. The bags were already folded. One contained Adriana's things, and the other had diapers and wet wipes and diaper cream for the baby. The cab came quickly. The two of them went downstairs, and Adriana struggled to drop off the road to the maternity hospital. Michael took her to the door of the emergency room, helped her remove her clothes and change into a robe and slippers. All the outerwear and shoes he had taken home again. Like last time, there was a closet here, but it was always full and finding things was a problem. The doctor looked at Adriana's paperwork, filled out all the information in the computer again, then invited her into the exam room and then into the EMAs. Michael at this time was already on his way to the office in a cab. He was confident that Adriana would be helped. The labor had lasted all day and Adriana was exhausted. The baby had turned, and there was no way it wanted to turn around. That's right, her water broke. The decision was made to do an emergency C-section. Adriana lay on a stretcher and was wheeled into the operating room, and in time for a blood test. And while the doctors were preparing, he was ready. It was possible to proceed to the operation. The anesthesiologist came, prepared everything for anesthesia, and sat down. A special anesthesia was injected nearby, and Adriana stopped feeling the whole lower part of her body. The doctors covered her stomach and legs with a curtain. They took out the baby. They lifted him up high and showed him to Adriana. Her head was a blur, and Adriana's vision of her son was blurry. He screamed. He was taken away to be measured and weighed for examination. The boy is 3 kilograms, 540 milligrams, 53 centimeters, a rich man. The stitch was sewn up, and the gurney with Adriana was taken to the ICU where 4 other women lay beside her. All of them were covered with blankets after the cesarean, as they were chilled after the anesthesia. Adriana stayed in the ward until 6 o'clock, and the nurse took her to her room. Her things were already standing by the bedside table. Adriana struggled to get from the gurney to the bed. Her stomach began to ache. A nurse came in and injected painkillers. It got easier. Adriana tried to sleep. There was no one else in the room except her. 2 hours later, another woman was brought in. She was also post-operative. The woman was very pale. Her long hair was dislodged from under her cap and spread out on the pillow. She was lying with her eyes closed. The nurse also injected her with medicine. In the neighboring wards, 2 lay women after surgery. The whole ward was post-op. Some had already brought babies. Adriana was looking forward to this moment with anticipation and horror at the same time. She could hardly sit up on the bed. Her stomach ached, and the catheter was still in place. The tube from it was in the way. It was scary to snag it. A nurse came in. "Girls, now I will take this beauty off, because it is really hard for you to walk." She cleverly freed both of them from the catheter, and the woman sighed with relief. "Now I'm gonna take you one by one to the shower. Take a towel and clean underwear." With those words, she stepped out. "My name is Anya. I had a baby girl. They said they'll deliver today. I'm Adriana. I have a boy. They haven't told me anything yet. Maybe they'll deliver today too, but we'll wait." The doctor came for rounds. Then came the nanny, the ceiling. Anya, your baby is under the lamp and will be brought in tonight. Adriana, your baby is in intensive care. He has a heart condition. Don't worry, you'll be able to see him every day from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. Until then, put him in a bottle and carry the baby's milk. You got it? Oh my God, what is this? Adriana cried. She was both scared and bitter that her baby was so small, had not had time to see anything, and was already sick. Adriana, everything will be all right. You'll see. We have excellent pediatric cardiologists. They do surgeries of any complexity. They'll do the same for your baby. And he'll live happily ever after with his mommy and daddy. Yeah, I guess it's best to hope and believe in the best outcome. I can't let the baby suffer. Adriana wiped her tears and wrote Michael a message. My son was born, but he has a heart condition. They're keeping him in the NICU. I don't know anything yet. I'll go and see him tomorrow. Michael came in 200 hours later, brought some things for Adriana. I was upset at first, but then I thought, what happens to the baby if the parents can't pull themselves together? We have to be strong for him. You hear me? We'll do whatever the doctors say and save him. Yeah, I'm of the same opinion. You can come by tomorrow. We'll go to the ICU together. You know, I'm probably not ready yet. I'm not forcing you. I understand how hard this must be for you. You haven't even held him yet. But I, the mother, carried him under my heart. So we have a stronger bond. We feel each other. I'll be with him as long as it takes, under any circumstances. If I can muster up the courage, I'll be there. But I can't promise. I can definitely make it in a day. Okay. For the rest of the day, evening and night, Adriana contacted every 3 o'clock and carried the milk to the NICU. The nurses there would take the bottle from her and feed the baby. The child spent 10 days in intensive care. After that time, he and Adriana were transferred to the second stage of nursing in another hospital. There Adriana was able to take him in her arms and take care of him. The baby was injected with different drugs, taken to ultrasounds and different procedures. Adriana was there for him. After 3 weeks in the hospital, a doctor came to her room and told her it was time for surgery. I've contacted the pediatric cardiology department. They're ready for you in 3 days. Why don't you get your stuff together and I'll get the paperwork ready. Okay, what kind of surgery? They're gonna do a valve replacement. They're professionals. A lot of kids with different pathologies go through them. I've heard from a lot of parents that they can handle even the most advanced cases. Thank you very much. I'll write the rights to my husband now. All the best to you. I'm gonna go get your baby's paperwork ready. Michael and Adriana named their son Robert. It was a name they both liked very much. Robert. Adriana envisioned her son as a grown-up, solid man. But first, daycare school. Adriana smiled to herself. Everything will be fine. She was sure of that. Adriana called Michael. Michael, we've been accepted for surgery. There's an opening in the hospital in 3 days. We're being discharged. If you're coming, please pick up the extra stuff. That's very good news. I have faith that Robert will be helped. They said they're going to enlarge the valve. I don't know how. I'm hoping to find out from the heart surgeon. He should be able to tell us at least briefly. Yeah, I think he will. I'll be there tonight, so get a bag of stuff ready to pick up. Adriana gave birth to Robert and put him in his crib. She went through her things and put the things she wouldn't need in a separate bag for Michael to pick up. There would be too much stuff at the discharge. Robert looked like any other infant, except that he often had vinyl around his lips. He wouldn't take the breast. There was no strength. Adriana would bond and feed him from a bottle. Michael bought her an electric breast milk. It made the mother's milk contract faster. Robert ate well and with appetite gradually gained weight. The day of the discharge came. Michael waited for them downstairs, took Adriana's son, and looked at his face for a long time. You know, it's like looking in a mirror, and there's me and not me. He looks a lot like you. Let's get in the car. I'm sick to death of these hospitals. Yeah, let's go. The cab's waiting. You carry it, Sonny, and I'll take the bags. After saying goodbye to the doctor and the nursing staff, Adriana left the room with Robert in her arms. Robert was in a warm fur envelope. He was sleeping sweetly. In the cab, they put him in a special restraint seat and strapped him in. Michael had bought the car seat in advance, and it waited for almost 2 months. We arrived at the cardiology hospital. In the emergency room, Adriana gave the documents to Robert, herself held him in her arms to undress the baby. The pediatrician filled out the card. After me, you'll go next door to the cardiologist's office. He will do a cardiogram and listen to your heart. Adriana obediently undressed Robert and put him on the table. The doctor examined and listened to the baby well from all sides. Now you can dress him and go to the cardiologist. Adriana carefully dressed her son and held him close to her. She went out into the corridor and saw a door labeled cardiologist. She went in, put the baby on the couch. The cardiologist had the CT machine ready. The cardiologist put sensors on Robert's body and recorded an EKG. Not a good cardiogram. We need an emergency surgery. Go up to the 3rd floor. They'll tell you what room you're in, and they'll come in and run the necessary tests for the surgery. Okay, doctor, thank you. Adriana quickly dressed the baby and went out. She took her bag and went to the elevator. The elevator came quickly and opened the doors in front of her. On the 3rd floor, they were quickly processed and led Adriana to a room. The room had a crib and an adult bed. There were no other beds in the room. There was also a closet so that clothes and shoes could be left here rather than taken home. A nurse came in and took Robert's blood test. The baby wrinkled his nose and whimpered unhappily. The cardiologist came in an hour later. The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow. It is necessary to be on an empty stomach. In the morning, a nurse will come and get Robert. She will take him to the operating room. The surgery will last 3 hours. You can rest during that time and go outside. Do you hear that? Do you need this? You need to be aware because the baby will need your help. With these words, she walked out and closed the door behind her. Adriana cried again, already out of fear for the baby. What if he died? She did not want to live. Let them take her heart and give it to Robert. Would she agree to die? No, it's worse when children are sick. It seemed that anything would be given to keep them healthy and cheerful. In the morning, Adriana dressed Robert in the washcloth the nurse had brought. Robert looked very touchy and whimpered with hunger. Adriana photographed this moment in her son's life. She would later look at this photograph many times. Here, her baby's body would still be without scars and incisions. A nurse came into the room to wrap him quickly in a blanket. The surgeons are now ready. Adriana wrapped Robert in the blanket and handed the envelope to the nurse. She walked out and closed the door behind her. Adriana couldn't find a place to be. She decided to get dressed and go for a walk outside. She quickly got dressed and put on her shoes, putting booties on her shoes, and walked down to the exit to the street. It was freezing cold. Adriana put on and buttoned up her blue down jacket, pulled the hood over her head, and walked out of the hospital doors. There were several stores and a long street near the hospital. Adriana simply walked forward, not paying attention to anything. The brisk walking calmed her down. She walked and walked at a brisk pace. Suddenly, her gaze was caught by the window of a children's store. There were some cute toys on display. She opened the door and found herself inside a large room. There were racks of toys everywhere. Adriana picked up different things until she stopped on a rustling and shiny lion. It was sewn from fabrics of different textures, and the paw had rings with different spikes to develop fine motor skills. She put the lion in the basket. A brightly colored rattle in the shape of a butterfly also caught her attention. She took that too. She also put a pack of diapers, a pack of wipes and diapers, and baby soap. Satisfied with her purchases, Adriana left the store. It was snowing. She admired the falling snowflakes. Suddenly, she realized that she and her son were going to be fine. Now they would bring him back from surgery. She would take good care of him, and he would recover quickly. She came into the room, quickly stripped off her soap and rattle, and wiped the lion with a damp washcloth. A nurse came in and said surgery is over. He's in intensive care for now. It's routine. The little guy's gonna be there for 500 hours. You can come to the NICU now. Feed him. Pack up. I'll take you. Okay, I'll get a bottle and some milk. Why? Try breastfeeding. He's not that weak while he's asleep, but he's about to wake up. They'd walked down a long hallway, then took the elevator and walked down the long hallway again to the very end. The ICU door opened with a running lock. Adriana stepped inside and saw various flashing colored machines with wires running from them to the children lying on high medical beds with handrails. She walked over to the bed where Robert was lying. He seemed so small compared to the size of the bed. There were several wires stretching into his calf, sensors beeping, instruments running. Adriana felt it roll up to her throat. She restrained herself and lay down next to her son. He was sniffling sweetly and was very sweet and touching. Soon he woke up, and without opening his eyes, he wanted to eat. Adriana gave him the prepared bottle with formula. She did not have much milk. The pediatrician allowed pre-feeding with formula. It was not very convenient in the NICU, but Adriana managed. Robert was full and fell asleep again. Adriana really wanted to protect him. She didn't notice that she had fallen asleep. The nurse touched Adriana's shoulder. Get up. You can carry him to his room. The cardiologist will be here soon for a checkup. Adriana got up and wrapped Robert in the blankets, held him close to her, and felt a rush of tenderness and sadness at the same time. Tears were pouring from her eyes. They came into the room. Adriana put Robert in the blanket, right in the crib. She sat down next to him and rested her head on the side of the bed. She stared at her son, unable to look away. The cardiologist came in. The surgery was a success, he said. It's healing now. You will spend another 2 to 3 weeks in the hospital, depending on how it goes. You should pay attention to things like fever, refusal to eat, bluing of the lips. In these cases, call a nurse immediately. Do you understand? I got it. It was the same old routine. Robert was taken for procedures and exams, and fed and dressed before bedtime. Adriana would take Robert in her arms and walk him back and forth down the long hallway. That way she felt better, and Robert was not as bored. On the walls in the hallway were many children's drawings and illustrations of fairy tales. Adriana would stop and show them to her son, and he would look at them curiously. After 3 weeks, they were discharged home. They were told to take care of the infection and not to give him a lot of exercise. Michael loved his son very much, carried him in his arms, took him for rides on the big car, and pampered him. Robert laughed heartily. 3 years passed, and it was time for Adriana to go to work. She could have stayed on, but she was desperately short of money. Medicines for Robert were very expensive. At work, Adriana was welcomed with pleasure, and there was still a lot of work to do. Adriana quickly got in shape after giving birth and went to the gym and swimming pool. Michael was babysitting his son at this time. He realized that Michael needed to reboot, and physical activity is the best way to do it. Robert was growing up and would soon require a new surgery. Unfortunately, the pediatric surgeon who operated on them was away in another country for training. He was the only one who could perform this level of surgery. Adriana sat at the appointment with the cardiologist and grimaced. Look for a clinic that will operate on you. Understand, you don't have much time without this surgery. Robert's condition may suddenly worsen, and then even lethal outcome is not excluded. I've seen many cases like this. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do yet. Surgeons of this caliber are worth their weight in gold, unfortunately. The cardiologist smiled wryly and continued filling out the paperwork. Adriana and Michael turned over a ton of information and found a clinic in Israel. They emailed them Robert's paperwork. 3 days later, they heard back from the clinic that they were ready to take them, and that the cost of the surgery would be $50,000. They sat stunned. They didn't have that kind of money. Even if they sold their apartment, it still wouldn't be enough. They could only get half the amount, take out a loan. But there's a way out, isn't there? I'll go to the chief. I know there's a lot of money in the company. Of course, the chief can refuse me, but he won't punch me in the nose for asking. Try it. I'll ask my boss tomorrow. Why don't we open a fundraiser? There are special funds, we should try that too. You and I should do the possible and the impossible. Yes, Adriana, I'll go call my boss, and I'll find the fund and talk to the chief too. In the morning, Adriana went into the chief's office. Kevin, there's trouble, Adriana. Something's wrong with my son. He needs emergency surgery. We don't do that here. We've requested various clinics. Only Israel will take us, but they ask for $50,000. I don't know where I can get that much money. We'll find half of it through relatives and friends. We'll sell my parents' summer house. But another $25,000 I don't know where to get. That's a lot of money, Adriana. Of course, the company could help you. But now we have used all the money to buy new equipment and took an additional loan from the bank. We want to install a production line. Sawing. What should we do? I'll think about it and tell you today. I have some ideas. Go to work. Adriana went to work, but she couldn't work. All her thoughts revolved around money. Where to get it, how to pay it back. In the evening, the chief called Adriana to her room. I've been thinking about it, and I'd like to make a suggestion. We can get funding for a new project now. It will be a new workshop to be a significant figure in the eyes of the partners. I have to be a good family man. And what's my role in that? Adriana asked. I know you're married. We'll have to divorce for a while. We'll get married. I ask you to be my companion for 2 years. You'll earn the money you need, and you won't have to give it back. You don't have to leave your husband. I won't demand sex from you. But I don't have time to look for someone for a long time. And you're a smart and savvy woman. And you have a child, which is a plus. All you will need to do is to appear with me at events, do photo shoots, travel with me on business trips. I can teach you a lot of things. You give me an image, and I'll give you money. It's a very unexpected offer. I'll have to discuss it with my husband. Of course, I won't force you to do anything. Just don't discuss it too long. We'll need your help soon. The child will be examined by the best doctors. I'll think about it, Adriana replied. Have a good day. I'll expect your answer tomorrow. Adriana felt like she'd been hit over the head with a shoe. How was it possible to divorce Michael? But the thought of money for the operation overshadowed everything. Robert can be saved. We need to talk to Michael. He's smart. He'll understand. That evening, she waited with a shudder to talk to her husband. Robert was playing quietly on the floor with a construction set. What if he was running out? Her lips set up sharply. Jesus, Robert, what's wrong with you? Mom, I feel sick. Hold on, son, I'll call soon. She dialed the ambulance number, recognizing what was wrong. The operator at the ambulance station promised an ambulance would arrive as soon as possible. Adriana dressed herself, gathered Robert's things, dressed him. The doorbell rang. It was the EMTs. They did a quick electrocardiogram. You need to be hospitalized immediately. We're all packed. Yeah, we're ready. Then let's go. Adriana and Robert left the house and got into the ambulance. The ambulance took them to a familiar cardiac hospital. In the waiting room sat their doctor. When he saw Robert, he turned pale. What's wrong? He coughed, and his lips were ringing. The paramedics did an electrocardiogram and said it was bad. I told you, there's hardly any time. I'll call my colleagues and we'll see what we can do. Thank you. Adriana couldn't cry. She was tense, and her head was like a fog. A nurse came and took Robert away. You can go up to the room with him. Just put on shoe covers. Colleagues will be here in a moment. Thank you. They went up to the 4th floor to the pediatric ward. There were doctors waiting for them. One of them took Robert's hand and said, "Do you want to see how your heart works on TV?" "I do." "Let's go then. And your mom will wait for us here." They're off to do an ultrasound on the heart. The valve lumen's getting bigger. It's still closing periodically, but time is running out. "You said an Israeli clinic was taking you." "Yes, they've agreed to take us as soon as possible. We have already collected half of the amount, and we can go halfway. They've agreed to take us at the end of rehab." "Do you have where to get the other half?" asked the doctor. "My husband and I are actively pursuing this issue." "Okay, we are in the process of replicating this seizure, but you just have to go to surgery right away." Michael called. "Where are you?" "Robert's taken a turn for the worse," Adriana answered. "We're at the hospital. The doctor said that the operation is necessary soon. The chief promised me a $10,000 loan." "That's good news." "Michael, can you come to the hospital? I need to have a serious talk with you." "Yeah, I'll be there in half an hour. I'll call you when I'm in the lobby." "Okay, I'm waiting." Half an hour later, Michael and Adriana were sitting in the lobby. "Michael, I'm going to tell you something. I won't interrupt you. I managed to find some money at my place of business. The chief has agreed to give it to me. But there's one tricky condition." "What's that?" "You have to sleep with him." "That would be too easy." "No, he wants me to pose as his wife and his family. 2 years without a bed. I mean, traveling with him, taking pictures everywhere, attending important events. And in return, he's promised to give me the money I need." "And that was it?" "No, that's not it. You and I need a divorce. A divorce. I have to be his legal wife. You realize the press will dig, and what they find has to be legal. What about me? We'll remain husband and wife, and after 2 years we'll be living together again." Michael, he's got a good idea. Michael resented getting a ready-made beautiful wife and son. "Michael, Robert needs surgery now, and I will do everything possible to save him." "And you?" "Me too, but not at the same cost." "What price?" "How about you sell your kidney? What's your way out?" "The 10,000 the chief will give you won't be enough for the surgery. I'll go to work with you tomorrow, and we'll talk about it." I am jealous, but at the same time I love Robert very much and would do anything for him. "Good," Adriana replied. "Tomorrow I'll invite the chief to the hospital. They won't let us out. We'll agree on a certain time and you'll come. It's a deal." Now I'm going home. I'm shocked by this news. I need to recover. Make the right decision, please. I'll do my best. Michael left and Adriana waited for Robert after the procedure. He was brought in an hour later and put on an IV. Adriana sat next to him and held his hand. She stroked it, stroking her son's forehead and cheeks. He lay pale. There was a blueness near his lips, but gradually the blush returned. The telephone bell rang. It was the chief calling. "Adriana, I'm sorry to bother you. Can you talk?" "Yes, I can. We're at the hospital, and the slag's gotten worse. He needs emergency surgery. I've tentatively agreed to your offer. My husband's coming tomorrow, and he wants to talk to you." "Why don't I come to the hospital where he's been sitting for hours?" "Let him come too," replied the chief. "The lawyer has prepared a contract so that you have no doubt that you will get your money." The next day, Adriana, Michael, and Kevin met in the hotel lobby. Michael had been thinking all night and had a right decision. "Kevin, I agree to let my wife go to serve you. This was not easy for me to accept. After all, I am her husband, and I love her. After all, I thought, she's going into the army for 2 years. I'll wait for her. I love my son very much, and I'm ready to accept different offers. Here's the contract. The lawyers have it all worked out. Your wife is appointed to the position of my personal assistant with the appropriate salary for a period of 2 years. For the 2 years, she is to literally shadow me. You will see each other at my home. There will be a separate room for you, but it won't be a lot of video conferencing during those 2 years. That's as much as you want." When Robert was discharged, Adriana went to work in her new position. All the employees were dying of envy, and they couldn't understand what the chief found in her. Michael went with Robert to Israel. The operation was successful. The boy was saved. After 2 years of forced separation, the couple was reunited again. The chief got the contract he had long dreamed of. He built 2 new workshops and started a new production facility.